Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a regular scheduled meeting of the Montclair Historic Preservation Commission. Notice has been posted in the Star Ledger, the Montclair Times, and also in the building, the municipal building. It's November 29th, and it is 7:40 p.m. Mr. Petto, roll call, please.
Okay, Chair Bennett.
Here.
Vice Chair Hammond.
Present.
Mr. Rooney.
Here.
Mr. Greenbelt.
Here.
Ms. Kane-Levy is absent at this time. Mr. Reimnitz.
Here.
She's expected, actually, that she's on the train and she's delayed.
Okay. Well, we'll note her arrival when she arrives. Ms. Gillette.
Present.
Mr. Angelo.
Present.
And Mr. Connolly.
Here.
Everybody received a copy of the minutes of our last meeting of October 25th.
Just to note, prior to that, on the agenda, we have a schedule for 2019.
I'm sorry.
The schedule for next year's meetings is
Oh,
listed
sorry.
prior to the
Yeah.
minutes.
Oh, sorry. I did it backwards. Okay, everybody in their packet received a schedule of meetings for 2019. How does that plan weigh for everybody?
No conflicts?
Any conflicts?
No issue.
I needed to double check on the April date. I know that's, it's Passover week. It's not that. I'm just not sure if that's the Easter holiday for public schools here. Just maybe better for, maybe I'm the only one affected by that. I'll check right now. I knew
If you wanna
that it
check.
flagged the April 25th date. We may just want to do it either
It might be
before.
also
or-
spring break.
Yes.
Depending on who's
That's what I'm trying to, I know it's Passover week, it's not the first night or anything like that, but typically the schools are closed around that time for Easter.
When? April?
I mean, I could be absent for that one if it's if I'm the only one that would affect.
It would affect me too.
So I'm just checking right now, but if we want to move on, that would be the only date I would.
I have a previous week observed for Easter.
Yeah, I thought, okay.
Sorry, it's just not coming up.
That is spring break week.
Yeah, it is spring break week, so it would just probably be better the week before or after.
I think the week before conflicts with Easter, doesn't it?
Yeah, because
Isn't it?
Good Friday would be
Good Friday.
Good
Right.
Friday would be the next day.
next day.
Right.
Wanna do the week after? Oh, that wouldn't be April anymore, would it? Yeah,
And
that would be the
you're
first
you're
one.
welcome to have it, I just won't be able to attend that one.
Okay. Well, shall we keep it for April 25th then? All right. Do we have to have a motion? Or is this?
Motion to approve the calendar.
Well, it'd be a motion to approve the calendar. As
Okay. A
Motion to, oh, go ahead.
Motion, what?
I was going to make a motion to approve the calendar as
Please.
submitted.
All right, second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the schedule for our meetings for 2019 will be published then?
Yes, correct.
All right, now we go to the minutes. Has everyone read the minutes? Does anyone have any comments or suggestions or?
I just have a question of form, perhaps, and it had to do with this 20 Montclair Avenue that we had a little email correspondence about, Graham. And is testimony, they gave testimony that they would do certain things. Is it only our comments that they have to respond to, or do they have to, like they testified that they were going to submit architectural plans and hire an architect to do this, and that did not happen. They did do these other things on this list. Does that mean
So that would have had to have been a specific recommended condition
That's
that
what
you would
I'm-
have
that's what I'm
parlayed
asking.
to the zoning board.
So
Correct.
even if they testify to it, we have to make sure it's a condition.
Correct. That would have to be a
Okay.
recommendation that carries forward
Okay.
to the board.
Oh, okay. That's what I was confused. It was exactly what I was going to ask too, because I actually thought that was a condition. But no. Okay. So, may I have a motion to accept the minutes? If anybody doesn't,
Motion to accept the minutes as submitted?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Abstain.
Right, you were against. Okay. Now, good people that are in the audience, we are going to ask you if you would please step outside. We are going to have an executive session, which shouldn't last very long, 15, 20 minutes tops. HPC. Before we have our applications, we have our committee reports. So design review and redevelopment. Is that it?
Well, the design review, I think, is what we're going to be seeing tonight, is the old Ferrara garage.
Ah, okay. Education and outreach. I guess that's me. I'm trying to put together a poster for the 150th anniversary. It's a little bit more complicated because of getting the, trying to get the images, the resolution size. So I wasn't able to pull it together for tonight, but we'll have it for next week, next month. So I hope everybody's here that we can actually take a photo.
If you need to up resolution or downgrade resolution, I can help you with that.
Oh, okay,
If
great.
you have an image of 300 DPI, you got to bring it up or down.
Right, thank you. And the other thing that I met with, I broached last meeting was a collaborative effort with the HPC and Montclair State University. So I met with Dr. Christopher Matthews last week. He's a professor of anthropology at MSU. He is instituting a course in February on modern archaeology, and he's going to focus. He wanted our help, and he wants to focus his students, which he thinks there will be 12, on Pine Street, the Pine Street Historic District, and specifically Mount Carmel Church and that site, the buildings on Mount Carmel Street. Initially, we hope to conduct a workshop similar to Researching Your Home at the Montclair Library for one of the classes, so that the students know how to do this research with all the available documentation between the library, the Historical Society, and Graham and the planning office. So that's in the works. We're looking at the workshop to be February 4th, but it'll be in the late afternoon. The next committee is the Landmarks Nomination Committee. So I think we have really good news. We've just received a grant, $24,000, almost $25,000, and we had applied for a CLG grant last year, and we didn't hear. And just last week, we got a letter from the state SHPO office saying that they didn't have the monies, the federal monies to give us, but they were going to go ahead and designate county monies for us. So Graham and I had a meeting this morning, telephone conference with Jonathan Kenny from the state office, and what this grant will be focusing on is establishing residential districts, 2 residential historic districts in Montclair, one being Wheeler Street and the other one being Oakcroft. So we have a working class district, Wheeler Street, which is a great combination of different housing forms, housing stock, and then Oakcroft, which borders Anderson Park, and that is really, you could be considered a commuter district. That's early 20th century. So we will be meeting probably by the first of the year to get the monies in, rolling for that. It has to go out for an RFP. So similar to what we've done with our other grants, we'll have that out advertising it.
I'm just curious, were the monies granted to us on the basis of those particular 2 districts, or was that something we elected?
No, we wrote a grant specifically, specifying those districts.
Okay.
And next year, for the CLG grant, we had included the estate section in that, but the estate section is over 300 properties. So if we'd gone together with these 3 districts, it would have been over 500 properties. And Jonathan Kenny thought that was a little bit too ambitious, and we realized it was too ambitious for the monies that were being granted. So next year, what we could do is apply for a grant for the estate section.
And just to update, I've started the application,
Oh, great.
putting the application together.
For the 2019
Correct, yeah, the
CLG.
application is due January 22nd, 2019, and I have the draft resolution, because the council has to approve that before we can
Right.
submit the application, so things have to move kind of quickly on that, so.
Okay, great. Thanks, Graham. Minor applications? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yes, I did
You-
some
you did the
signage
last one.
review. Can you remind us what it was?
I think, oh, was the child care center on Glenridge Avenue was one.
Yes.
And there were a couple of other ones. I don't remember. They were all very straightforward. Nothing
Yes,
was really.
there was.
Okay. And then revisions committee? Nothing for,
No.
no. And then we do have grants. Can you give us a grant update for the two grants that we're currently working on?
Sure. So the redevelopment and historic districts analysis that Ms. Krugman has been working on for the commission. We met as a committee with Ms. Bennett and Mr. Rooney. I guess was it 2 weeks ago, just
2
prior to
weeks
the
ago.
Thanksgiving holiday, to review the initial draft that Ms. Krugman has developed. We should be receiving the next draft probably in early December, and then we're going to schedule Ms. Krugman to do a presentation to the commission at the December 20th HPC meeting to present her findings. And then on the western expansion with Mr. McCabe, we have unfortunately not heard from Mr. McCabe. So,
Yeah. So I think those are all our reports. We have no old business, so we're on to new business. So our first application is HPC Certificate of Appropriateness, application 2018-54, 18-30 South Fullerton Avenue, The Crescent Shops, LLC. So please come forward and hi. So before we begin, would you, Mr. Angelo will swear you in?
Who's testifying? We both will do it. Both of them? Okay, great. So if you wouldn't mind standing, raise your right hand. You swear affirm that the testimony you are about to give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
Could you identify yourself?
I'm Yarmila Packard. My husband and I, with Flurry, are the owners of 18-30 South Fulton Avenue.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we couldn't do this.
Okay.
Ira Smith. I'm principal of Smith Marin Architecture and Interiors.
Hi, Ira. All right, just a little background. This block is in the town center storage district, which is the largest commercial district in Montclair. The historic properties in this district date from 1840 to 1860. The majority of the 176 structures within the district are commercial properties that are 1 to 3 stories in height. These buildings feature a variety of architectural styles popular in the 19th and 20th century. This building, or this block of building, is considered a contributing or an altered structure in the district. 18 to 39 South Fullerton Avenue, known as the Crescent Shops, is currently described in the 1982 Historic Sites Index as commercial vernacular with Gothic details or collegiate Gothic. Similar terracotta-clad buildings dot commercial districts of many local business districts. This is an application requesting a certificate of appropriateness. The Commission will hear testimony as to the work proposed on this building as it is located within a landmark district. And as detailed in Montclair Code 347-136, modification to this property within the historic district, which is requiring a certificate of appropriateness, include the following: demolition or construction, either by addition or alteration, change in the exterior elevation of any improvement by addition, alteration, or replacement, and any change in existing or addition of new signage or exterior lighting. Now, have you received the memo that our historic consultant, Mr. Tom Conley, wrote?
Yes, we've received two. Well, one from Graham and one from Tom, dated September 18th, 2018.
Okay. And
What's that?
do
Is that not this one?
No, it's correct. It says date receipt, that the
Oh,
plans
date
received by
received,
Coney
okay.
Island
I'm
the
sorry.
18th, the
Date reviewed
25th.
September 25. Thank you, Greg.
So, have you read through these? Our new process now is that we're going to use Mr. Conley's comments, and I guess maybe what you should do is go through your presentation first, and then we'll go over his comments and see if you have any questions.
That would be great. We
Okay.
anticipated something like that. We have a short statement explaining the project, and then we thought, using the memo, we could address the comments raised so far.
Okay.
So it's turn to us.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair Bennett. Thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate you taking the time to hear the application. Thank you, Tom, for the report and evaluation. We've introduced ourselves. I'm very pleased to turn the introduction over to my client, Yarmila Packard, who's a co-owner, she said, of 18-30 South Fullerton for some time. I'd like to just give her a moment to share her thoughts about the project, and then I'll turn to my presentation.
We're here to talk about our plans for renovating the South Fullerton commercial frontage of our building. When we bought the building in 2001, its atrium served as a sheltered entrance for our commercial tenants. We have 7 commercial spaces with entrances through the atrium, and as the neighborhood changed, we increasingly heard complaints about individual store visibility and customer access. Our commercial leases finally lined up to give us this window to address these problems and give the building a much-needed redesign. We tasked Ira Smith to help bring our commercial storefronts into the 21st century while being respectful of the historic elements of our building. And we're excited to present the results of our design efforts today.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm convinced. So we recognize that it's not that often that an altered building is worked on to the degree that we're proposing. There's an intervention from the 1980s, and we're looking at undoing some of the poor decisions made at that time, although I'm sure they looked like the right decisions at that time. We understand also that in an older historically protected town center, all buildings undergo incremental improvements, and many of the properties around this one, since Luther and Yai purchased the property, have seen improvements, whether it's been a new awning, new signage, lighting, facade cleaning, etc. All of it adds up to a whole as a streetscape that's greater than the sum of its parts, and we are thinking of the property as sort of joining its peers in improving the entire streetscape, but also strategically improving this building so that its improved parts bring a much greater sense of dignity and whole to this particular building. What we've aimed to do here, therefore, is catch the building up to its neighbors. As you've probably seen, as I mentioned, our approach is to focus on the repair or let's say the remedy for 1980s intervention, which was very aggressive. I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at the application, but to sum up, the building had in the 1980s a large atrium added to its base, dark glass, striped canopy. It actually pushed the facade forward about 30 inches from its original location, impeding on the sidewalk. It did this to create an interior mall. For those of you who know the property particularly well, you know that it means there's a double storefront. It's actually really hard to see the stores. In the 80s, when we were still living in the legacy, the primacy of automobile culture, we almost had a kind of anti-pedestrian approach to how to improve our buildings. And so that mall was sort of a Main Street version of what was happening out in the suburbs. But more than that, it meant that historic fabric was lost, a lot of historic fabric. Not just the 2 columns, the bottom half of which have been removed and are a feature of our project, but storefronts, the bulkhead below the storefronts, and the transom above that, all removed. So what we were trying to do, as I said, is restore dignity and approachability to this building. It is not a historic recreation, but rather a contemporary design that we believe is deeply inspired by the original building. What I'd like to do now, well, to us, because we've been working on this project for a while, it's self-evident what's being removed and what's being added. In the past, I would have marched through the drawings, literally drawing by drawing, to explain what was old and what's new. I can do that, but I was actually just going to jump right to Tom's memo. If people would like, though, I don't know if it's appropriate to spend some time looking at the drawings.
Let's look at the drawings.
Yeah, I think we need to at least have some point of reference.
Okay.
So,
Okay, fair enough. I suggest, you know what? I suggest we maybe get a general orientation then and start with the colored sheets, which include the existing conditions photos as well as historic photos. So it's this set, and I'm at HP EC1, first page. And you can see where the striped awning is and the dark glass below. That's the atrium I'm referring to. Take note on the left side of this image at the corner that that was also remodeled in the 1980s to form a solid wall of glass. There used to be an entrance on the corner. They didn't wrap the awning around that corner. As you can see, they just sort of left the space above the storefront there bare. We think at the time they also replaced windows on the second floor, introducing these windows with the batten patterns above those windows, around those windows. And then for more context on HP EC2, close-up of that corner I mentioned, sort of Spartan appearance. And all the windows again on the second floor have been replaced, and the batten pattern continues. HP EC3 is now looking at the north, leading toward the crescent deck, and we can see, some of you know the building well enough to realize it's Bistro 18 at the left side of the photograph. The property, I should note, you have a survey in your package, but all that green space in front of the building, between the drive lane, the turning lane that is, and the face of the building actually belongs to the township. The property ends with the facade of this building. HP EC4 was included to highlight details that may come up during this review, to call attention to some conditions of interest. How the atrium in the upper left, for example, you can see how it's protruding forward of that original column. That original column actually had a flared base, which was cut away in order to allow the storefront to kind of come out perpendicular. So there are these moments of sort of surgical excisions in order to make the 1980s project possible. In the bottom right are a pair of photographs showing that atrium. The mirrored columns were actually, that is the structure of the facade. The facade was in that plane, and I think the mirroring was their idea of kind of making the structural columns disappear. They seem to not be there. Now we go back in time, circa 1940, and a pair of photographs from the digital collection at the Montclair Public Library. You can see on the left the inverted corner at Crescent and South Fullerton. You can see the bulkhead, or what I call the bulkhead is the base, that portion of the storefront that's solid before it meets the sidewalk. And there's a door recessed in there. The glass stops at a certain height, and then above that you have these arch motifs. It looks like a fanlight window right sort of facing us on the chamfer of this building, and a pair of signs to the left and right that are also arched. We can call that the transom. The panel above that remains. That's those tight pointed arches. I call it the arcuated panel, but we could call it whatever works for you. And that remains. And as we go to the right, before the photo on the right actually, if you see where it says the signage sign, it says drugs, the projecting sign says drugs. So within that next bay, we have a recessed storefront. Our plan, as you may have seen, directly emulates the corner inverted entry, as well as introducing a recessed entrance in the middle of these bays. If you go a little further to the right of that inverted bay, things start to get dark in the photograph. You can see there's a street sign. I want you to go down to the bottom of that street sign and just look past it to the next storefront in the next bay. You can see that the bulkhead drops down in height. This is a sloping site, which is not insignificant. It's a change of almost 5 feet from the crescent to the entrance to the crescent deck. And that presents a compositional challenge as you try to bring the facade back in a way that compositionally makes sense, but also adheres to present-day zoning, which tightly constrains where the signage is supposed to fall in terms of the height off the finished grade. The image to the right, did everyone follow me on that? I think, yeah. Okay. The image on the right shows a corner of the building. I was really proud to find this after a couple hours of scouring that library website, because it gives you a glimpse of that corner. It's the only old photograph I've seen of this building from this vantage point. You can see again there is a recessed entrance. You can see the original awning starts just below the arcuated panel. The material you're looking at there it's not stone, it's glazed terracotta. To its right, interestingly, is a sign sitting where there's transom. It says antiques. All of this is relevant to the work we're doing. Notice the bulkhead under where it says antiques. Looking at the figures, you might imagine maybe that bulkhead's 2 feet tall, maybe 30 inches. But again, keep in mind the entire site is sloping about 5 feet from south to north. So the bulkhead constantly steps down in order to not end up with such a high bulkhead you don't even see that there's glass, half glass. We now go to HP2, and you have a before and after. Let me apologize right off the bat that we took these photographs to give you an indication of how long we've been working on this when the trees still had leaves on them. And so in our after, it looks like the trees are somehow still there. It wasn't possible to scrub them out of the view, but if you can, just imagine the trees we're not sandwiching the trees as part of our facade. The columns that we're introducing, the two in the middle, one to the right of the sign that says Illusionist, to the left of the orange sign that's a little hard to read, it says Feminine. Those are the bottom halves of the original columns. Those are new. Those are elements we're reintroducing. What we're also doing, as you can see with the bulkhead, it steps down, starting from the sidewalk. I'll work my way up. The bulkhead has a typical height of about 16 inches, and based on the historic photograph, it looks like the bulkhead sort of starts, and when it gets to a column, it transitions down. So between that reddish sign and the feminine sign, you can see our bulkhead steps down, just like it does in the historic photograph. It does the same thing again after the Illusionist sign, just to the right of the new column. The Bistro 18 sign, and I think this will come up perhaps when we review Tom's memo more closely, it's lowered. It's lowered on purpose. There are really two main reasons. If we don't lower it, we're out of the zoning, what I believe is the zoning restriction on the height of where the sign has to fall. So it ends up really high up and potentially non-conforming. What our plan does is essentially introduce a sign band, reintroduces a sign, let's say it introduces a sign band onto the building. And it makes that gesture in order to give the tenants much greater visibility for both the current tenants and the property owner. There's been years of frustration that you can't see who's occupying this building as a retailer. It's very hard to steer people here. The signage is hard to read, and it's hard to know where you're at. So we're trying to remedy that by not blocking the signage but raising it up, maintaining or really reintroducing the awnings, but in a way that creates more of a sense of outdoor passage. They project, I believe we have them projecting 4 feet, which is significant.
Could I just address, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yes.
could I just address the zoning compliance
could you?
question so that we can clear that up? Because I know Mr. Connolly had raised that as an issue. But it's 347.110.1, letter A, number 6, requires that wall-mounted business signs shall be placed within the building sign location band. So I think, and then subsequent to that, there is, if the building does not have a sign location band, then there is height restriction requirements, maximum of 12 feet. But by establishing a new sign band location on the building, I think that you can locate this sign higher
Okay.
to align with the adjacent
Okay.
signs, and that would comply with the zoning
All right,
ordinance.
I understand the distinction there.
Yeah, so basically, the zoning ordinance says if it's within a sign band, it doesn't matter about that second part of the requirement.
Got it, got it. Our second reason, which I realize I didn't get to, besides the read or perhaps misread on that, was that because the storefront is so much taller here, for example, at this end of the building, you have a door, we have a transom above the door that's in the plane of the main storefront. I'm looking at the Bistro 18 storefront right now. Then we have the signage band, which is actually from the underside of where it says Bistro 18 down to the sidewalk. That's about 13 feet. We were very concerned that if the signage ends up too much higher, it's out of sync, out of character with where the other signs are, and also where you tend to see signage in the town center, which traditionally, I know from my own experience, and you guys can relate to this from walking around, usually it's somewhere between 10 to 12 feet. In a more major urban center, you might see it higher in a more prominent location. We wanted to avoid that and tie the signage better to the storefront or entrance literally below. The materiality, which is called out in the Cad drawings, is for the bulkhead we were looking at a smooth sanded stucco, and that would be both for the bulkhead and the sign band. We were looking at metal-clad storefront and a Sombrella fabric for the awnings. The sign panels, which would receive their signs, we're not applying for any particular signs. We're merely saying we're developing a concept or strategy for which we'd like your approval. Those sign panels are planned to be painted AZEK, which is a highly durable and repairable material, which is very good for when signage might change out over the years. We have metal projecting lighting finished to match the storefront. And you'll see that also steps down at the Bistro 18 storefront. We have to its left a number of covers. We're going to put the junction boxes there, so if and when another business comes with a longer name, the hassle and expense and potential disfigurement associated with running new electrical lines doesn't have to happen. I'll talk more about the rhythm of the facade in a few minutes, but it was important to us to introduce a level of ornament or detail that was consonant with the kind of detail the building already has historically. So that's why we introduced these almost as ornament, the covers. Then if we go to the next sheet, HP3, we're at the south corner where you can see the inverted entrance. The base, it is at the south Fullerton-facing column. It is about 16 inches. The terrain keeps climbing, even as we get to the corner, so the bulkhead is actually a little bit lower by the time you finish the storefront for where it says Heritage. I think you can see in this photograph more strongly our intention to express or reintroduce the horizontality that's referenced in Tom's memo through the awnings, through the sign band for most of the bays, through the lighting itself, and that the lighting itself is based on a rhythm which relates directly to the spacing of the arcuated panel just above it. I'll come back to the lighting, so I know there's a real question there about reducing it or maybe even eliminating the lighting. We're excited about the possibility of a blade sign projecting from the corner retail space. The retailers expressed interest in it as well, so I just wanted to call attention to that moment too. And then if we turn the page one more time, we're looking at exactly the kind of thing I was mentioning when I said our intention was not to do a historic recreation. We felt so much of the original columns had been lost that it wouldn't be appropriate, that a different strategy would be. And so what you're looking at here on the left is the existing condition. You can see how the glazed terracotta column was rather abruptly just broken off. What we would do is reintroduce in the gap you see between that rough edge and the top of the existing canopy a transitional band, which would use the detailing of the existing building in terminating the the column, so the wash on the column would come out, and we could address a flashing problem, in an age-old manner that way with these beveled edges. That would be cast stone, a darker color than the remaining recreation below. We would like to polish that so it stands out as a transitional band, sort of honoring the difference, the change between the original fabric and the new. And the material below is cast stone. Our intention there is to match the texture and color of the original glazed terracotta above. So if we go now to the CAD drawings, I'm hoping that the extra detail I went into makes it easier maybe to review these. On the first sheet, you can see in the top left the demolition plan. So you've got that double storefront, the one that pokes out from the facade, which has two main entrances, and then beyond it, the actual storefronts that are presently there into individual retail locations. We are removing both sets of entrances. And then the drawing below shows the new plan. The legacy of the building is that each structural bay has two tenants. Historically, it may have had one, but the marketplace culture seems to work, and if need be, I can address that reality for you. So we have two doors that are in the recess between each bay. You can see, starting on the left, the new recessed entrance at the corner. This is based directly on the geometry. We were able to uncover it because we had to do some work inside to prepare the space for the current tenant, and we found the actual footprint of the recess. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, just the way it is, you now have to have 18 inches clear on the pole side of a door to meet code, and so we're not quite as deeply recessed into the space. We had to pull it forward, I think, about 5 inches. So that door was originally pushed a little bit further into the space, but then our door wouldn't make code if we'd have done that. All the other doors make code. You'll notice on the far right, where Bistro 18 is now, that we chose not to repeat the same bay, not to be cookie cutter, but to recognize that this is a corner of a building. Urbanistically, therefore, there's justification for doing something differently. There's a tradition, a long tradition for at least 20 years, the 20 years I've been here, of having a cafe presence there with people who dine right along the sidewalk. Both the tenant and the property owner wanted to maintain that tradition, and the best way to do that and maximize seating was to create a longer run of glass, not break it up like a traditional storefront by centering the door. It also works well with the current plan of the space, which is kind of off-center. When you enter, it's a very deep space on the right. So it sets it up very well for maitre d', with dining further into the space, and then a group of tables to the left. So urbanistically, functionally, from the perspective of someone who's come off of Church Street or from Bloomfield Avenue, heading south, we thought there was real value in having this corner be distinct, in the same way that the corner at Crescent and South Fullerton is distinct in plan. And you can see, too, the two cast stone column covers. If you look along the new face of the building, they're a pair of sort of trapezoidal shapes that have hatching in them. That's the two columns we're talking about recreating. The next sheet is essentially enlargements of all of that. I don't feel like I need to go through it in the same level of detail. Unless you have a question, I'll move on. Okay. You learn so much about a building when you draw it, and this building was especially that way. So we took the time to draw what was really there. And when we first drew the existing conditions, the void of the atrium and its canopy really stand out. That's the drawing on top. We're looking at the South Fullerton elevation. And our proposed elevation is just below. You can see for yourself, if you look at the ground line, how on the left, the line begins sort of higher up on the page relative to where it says number 2, facade renovation, elevation east. And by the time we get down to the right side of that elevation, we're a lot closer to that line. That's because, as I said, the ground plane has dropped about 5 feet. Why don't I just focus your attention on the bubbled or dashed rectangle that says 4A3.201. That is going to show us an enlargement of the column treatment. The next sheet actually is just additional elevations for the rest of the building at the same scale we were looking at. Now we're at A3.201. Number 4 is on the right, so we've enlarged that portion of the building. You can see where the arcuated panel is on either side of the original column, and just below that you can see something called out as the transition piece, cast stone. To the left, you can see how the facade is now in plane with all of the structure above it. Compare that to the drawing on the left, which is called number 1, existing facade section. That depicts graphically how the atrium bumps out from the original building. Tom reached out to me, or I reached out to him. We had an exchange, and we're talking about the historic fabric that might be left here. In that atrium, presently, there's a ceiling, and above that ceiling is mechanical equipment, a duct, sprinklers, some lighting. He was wondering, we were wondering, we had hoped that there might be evidence of the original transom, or even the awning devices. None of that remains. It was all cut away in the 80s. You can see on the same sheet, details 5 and 6. We are placing the storefront in the same relative location as it used to be from the historic photographs, and we carry out the field dimensions for where the glazed terracotta is above and how it runs down the facade. So that's something we're bringing back. Yeah, I think I'll just continue. This last sheet gives you a super enlargement of that whole storefront system on the left. You can see the 4-foot awning, create a really generous covered sidewalk area, generous shade. One of the problems, the reason we have black glass is that this building is hit with a lot of morning light and late afternoon light. It gets very warm in there, so I think whoever did the job in the 80s was sort of thoughtful in a way. They were trying to address some very practical problems. So we're going to tackle that the old-fashioned way with a deep awning and use the power of shadow to keep the interior stable temperature.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I couldn't hear that.
Oh, I was just saying that one of the reasons that there's black glass on the atrium today, it wasn't just an aesthetic choice. It's because that east-facing part of the building receives a lot of direct sunlight over the course of the year, even during the winter. It builds up like a little greenhouse in there. So we're going to address that with the awning, with a projection instead, which will provide deep shadow and means that there's less direct light or heat gain in that atrium. The other drawings, it's hard to know where to stop, but the other drawings are here as references for how we're dealing with recessed conditions for the entrances to the retailers. You can see, for example, I don't know, let's look at number 6. You can see this in the original photograph, that even when the door is recessed, they continue the transom in front of it. So it looks like there are 2 transoms in number 6, but that's because there's one over the door, and then there's one traveling in the same plane as the facade.
There's no soffit closing it off? It's just a hanging...
We weren't going to close it off. We thought there was a benefit to having visibility to the light and whatever view, you know, when you're inside the retailer, trying to improve that condition. Because right now, as you know, if you're there, it just feels like you're squirreled away in a closet instead of enjoying being part of the streetscape. Those are the drawings.
Thanks, Ira.
Should we move on to the memo?
Yes, why don't we? I just want to make sure I have the correct one in front of me. It's not September 25th. It is. Okay, sorry. Okay.
Go ahead, okay.
Yes, please.
All right. So there's comments A through J on the memo, and the first one is all proposed new cast stone column covers shall be replaced to match the existing. Where an important architectural feature is missing, its replacement is always recommended in the rehabilitation guidelines as the first or preferred course of action. We understand. We understand this and recognize that. However, we made a conscious decision, not based on cost, to side with the principle that it was more appropriate to distinguish the historic fabric rather than try to compete with a direct recreation, or, you know, worst case, smooth over the difference between what was old and what was new. Our approach was not to strike a direct contrast. Sometimes you see that. You know, we're going to replace the stone column with something that has the same shape, but we'll do it out of metal. No, our intent was to have a real marriage of old and new that made each look better. And so we were after a sympathetic treatment that borrows the geometry, modularity, the rhythm of the existing columns. So as I showed you when we were looking at the drawings, our intent was to continue the same overall trapezoidal geometry, use a transition element with traditional detailing to differentiate between the old and new, but to allow the new column to be a little more, a little simpler, a little more minimal. The entire storefront for us we regard as something that belongs in the 21st century. I don't want to overstate the point, but the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties, in addition to the point made in Tom's memo, does also talk about not creating a false sense of history. And we think it's valuable to be able to record or present the different eras of the building, that it makes it more interesting rather than try and, as I say, smooth over the difference between the old and the new. We're hoping we have a sympathetic audience here on that matter. We're using cast stone, which is different from precast. I know there are a lot of architects, mostly architects on this panel, but precast is really kind of, when it's done well, at the end of the day, it's still a wetter form of creating blocks, and you can end up with little voids and a slick surface that really is concrete. Cast stone, on the other hand, is dry packed, and it has much more the appearance of stone, more like the material that's there today. And as I said, our intent would be to try and closely match the texture and color that's on the facade now. Should I keep going? Because I think philosophically there are other things I might address the same way, as opposed to knocking off each item with a yay, nay.
Right.
One at a time. So keep going, maybe? Is that okay? Whatever you guys feel best.
Well, I think everyone's familiar. You've familiarized us with the building. If everyone hasn't seen it already, so maybe we should ask questions at this point.
If that's preferred, no problem.
Okay. So, Ms. Gillette.
A few quick questions. I noticed you were talking about the east facade and how much sun it got. Did you happen to do any kind of shading study or shadow study based on the buildings surrounding? I'm just used to hearing that as a complaint more on the south or the west facade of a building, so I was curious about your studying of the sunlight.
That's a great question. We did not do sun shade study. I think Yai can address more directly the kinds of problems that the sun has caused over the years. If that's something that would be important to the commission, we could certainly do that. I think we would have gone further on the awning, but I think there was a projection limit for fixed is 48 inches. So we could really nip it in the bud, but we went to 4 feet, maxing it out, just thinking, well, we'll get as much shade as we can under the current zoning.
I can talk about talking with Heritage, who is our new tenant in the corner in number 30. They're very concerned because they're shirts and their stuff is right up at the window. Very concerned about the bleaching that's going on, and they have already noticed over a couple of weeks that they've needed to trade out stock and put some on super sale because of the effect of the sun. We talked when they first moved in about putting in some kind of film for the windows and did some research on that. And the tenants that we talked to about that really didn't like it because it made it really dark, and it made their clothing, what they were selling, not as tangible to the people walking by. So it was really requested that we try to find another way of protecting from the sun. But it really was a problem that our retailers pointed out to us, particularly Heritage.
I would also just ask the question about the light fixtures and understanding the photometrics of it. I don't fully understand how that it seems like there might be, they look like point lights. I just would like to understand the photometrics of those lights. Are you going to get big scallopy circles? That's what it kind of looks like it might do.
So this particular fixture, and we sent along a cut sheet.
Yeah, I was trying to.
Okay. It comes with accessories, little hoods, as well as a lens that focuses the light. So you have a couple of different ways of.
Yeah, you didn't select. I didn't see that you had selected one of the options, or.
We did not get that far. Correct.
Yeah.
But you can see. Well, you've seen the options. Then that you've got options for a 12-degree spot, for example. There's a narrow flood. There's shielding as well, so that you can minimize glare. The capped style is a reference to. I'm looking at this sheet just for everyone's reference. Bottom right, cap style, 45 degrees, 90 degrees flush. That. Oh, and they're actually depicted to the left.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not our intention to do anything but illuminate that zone in which the sign falls.
Yeah, the photometrics I think would help me, or some sort of rendering, but I guess.
Yep.
And then my last question is, I understand it's not really in your scope of work right now, but the upper story, I was just wondering if you had done any investigation of the existing conditions of those, I think what you were calling them batten panels.
Yeah, so we have done some.
So you have some data collected.
We have some data
maybe
collected. That's the right way to put it. So those battens are about 1/3 real, in that they are covering seams for plywood that was installed at the time we think the windows were replaced. So if you can imagine the panel of wood that's abutting is covered, that seam's covered by every third batten. The battens themselves are not in great shape, but part of this proposal is to clean, repair, and repaint all of the second-story window surrounds.
But the whole batten, your existing investigation would confirm that that whole section, like per the earlier photographs, that's the sort of just a dummy panel with a smaller window in it?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, we haven't probed it from the inside, but comparing it to the historic photographs and what we see from the outside, yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Reynolds?
On HP, I'm going to refer to your color renderings for the most part. On HP EC3, you said that the property line is the face of that building on the side? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that condenser sitting on your property? Is that condenser feeding the building?
Are you talking about the one at the base of this venting thing? On the
Yeah,
left?
the little the condensing unit.
This guy here?
Yes, it is.
Okay. What are you going to do on the under, maybe it shows in your details, what's the underside of the recesses, the bulkhead recesses? I know what the face is, it's stucco, but What is the ceiling of those recesses as you go into the doors?
We were looking at a simple treatment, a dense glass product, an exterior wallboard product that could be painted out.
Painted, okay.
Yeah.
What's happening with there's a brick sidewalk, it looks like, on the inside where this whatever mall existed. What's happening with the sidewalk condition?
So, okay, when we believe that herringbone sidewalk you see inside the atrium was put in place at the same time the atrium was built. We've been on the underside of that. It looks like there's concrete metal decking, therefore probably concrete above, and this treatment is set into that material somehow, or it's finishing that concrete deck. We are, because we want continuity of finish for the retail spaces, which will all move forward to the line of the mirrored column, and because we know we have other work on the sidewalk for it to flow into these recessed entrances, our plan is to remove the herringbone that you see, all of it, so that, as shown in the images, the before and after, the brick will be gone.
Okay.
And we'll extend the interior wood floor.
Last question I have is about your little electrical boxes for a future tenant at the corner. That seems to conflict a little bit with the comment that you don't want to do the same rhythm of recesses between the pilasters. What do you imagine will happen in terms of installation of a future door there?
So are we talking, we're on HP2?
HP2, yes, just to the left of the Bistro 18 sign, where you have the blank electrical boxes, and the idea was it's for future tenant.
So, because there's been long-term success with the restaurant tenant who has successfully, for the past few years, occupied the full bay, the thinking is that only one door, and maybe this is a preferential retail location because of its proximity to the other activity going down north on South Fullerton. The thinking was that this bay should only get one entrance, that it could support, because of its location, I guess, an appeal and track record, one tenant who occupies the whole space. But if the next tenant had a name like Nouvelle Bistro, they would need more room for their sign to travel to the left. So nothing, there's been no discussion about, what would an alternative storefront look like in the future. If that ever happened, of course, we'd be coming back here.
I have actually one more question, and that's where the stucco meets the sidewalk. Is it your intention that the stucco just drops right down on the concrete sidewalk?
One of our details from the CAD plans actually shows that we would stop it approximately a half-inch short and fill with a sealant painted to match the stucco.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Primo?
On page HP2, which I believe we were just referring to, I'm noticing the pilaster, the rhythm of the building, where you have the continuity between the pilaster on the second story. You've now talked about your philosophy as to using a new sympathetic approach but contemporary, and that's going to continue on all the other pilasters. I'm wondering, I don't know if it was intentional or maybe just in your paper drawing, you're missing the lower pilaster that defines.
Never existed.
Never existed?
Never existed.
On the first floor?
Nope. Look at the historic photo.
Right, but there is continuity between the second story pilaster and the first story pilaster in three of them on the eastern facade. I know that's a double tenant. It's a double space tenant. But is that why there's no continuity there?
I think we have continuity. I'm not sure I understand your question.
I'm looking at the, maybe I'm misunderstanding how to read this, but
Yeah.
I see, so they're alternating.
Okay, yes, so every other
okay.
second floor vertical,
Doesn't continue down.
it ends in a collegiate point just before that, or it enters into that arcuated panel and terminates there.
Got it, so in this particular one doesn't continue down.
Every other one, right. We're continuing down the ones that used to continue down.
Got
The
it,
two
okay.
in the
I
middle.
didn't recognize,
Yep.
so if from a width-wise, maybe it's just a distortion from the drawing, the actual, the width of that space is the same as the other, it's the same module. This space here between this pilaster and the termination of the building is approximately the same width.
Yes, that's correct.
That's just a function, okay. So I
That's
think
right.
it's the perspective of the drawing that makes it stand out.
Understood.
Did you consider, just because of the natural visual access to the site, did you consider signage? You showed on the corner a blade sign for the heritage tenant. I'm wondering, did you consider blade signs running perpendicular to the facade of the building across the entire southern or eastern facade for each tenant?
Yeah, we did. The client's very interested in that. We thought because blade signs are permitted, and we don't have a particular blade sign design to submit, that would be a follow-up application with the commission if and when tenants went ahead with that. One deceiving thing about HP2 is that we photoshopped out a pre-existing blade, it's not a blade sign, but a sign. You'll recognize it when I pass this around because it was an omission. There's a sign that marks the building called the Crescent. It's an oval blue sign.
Yes.
That will remain, and the building owners love it, we love it, but it inspired the idea that, gosh, there should be blade signs on this facade. I'll pass this around.
Oh.
It's also useful, too, because we took this view and photoshopped in the design we're proposing tonight. I think it might just be helpful to have this as an additional visual.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, are we, I guess, in line with that question, it seems to me from the merchant's point of view, from the point of view of increasing the visibility to pedestrian traffic, a perpendicular blade sign would probably be advantageous and also appropriate.
I think you'll see it coming. It's really a matter of, I think, getting the storefront approved and built, and then the tenants understanding, here's my opportunity, and coming forth with a proposal.
Are you, two more questions. Again, to Jenny's point, the second story, it's quite evident to me, as Jenny pointed out, that that's a infill that was done later. Is there any chance that you would try to return to the larger windows?
So I would say this was something we discussed,
As opposed to
but
restoring.
it's outside the scope of this proposal. The owners recognize what it would add to the building, but it's not part of this proposal.
I want to point out that second floor are residences.
Oh.
We have 8 apartments,
Oh,
and those are really big living room windows already. I think if you made them a lot bigger, you need to put in balconies. And, they really take up a lot of living room space.
I think there are other conditions too, like the ceiling in those spaces is not as high as it was originally, and there's sheetrock conditions where people have bookshelves or art on the walls, so it would be disruptive in that way if and when the building owner attempts to reintroduce the larger windows.
are those rental units or
Those are rental units.
All right, and then, I guess my last question, let me see if I recall. Are you going to, this has been a situation that's risen multiple times in our commission, where you have a multi-tenant property where there's an awning system or a signage system, that the question is, do you intend to adhere to a uniformity between the different tenants in terms of awning color, awning depth, awning material, and also from the point of view of signage conventions? is your intention to follow a consistent module, if you will?
That is our intention, because the two trees are there, and they are the municipalities. We thought it best to preserve regularity for the awnings, same color, same depth, etc. If we did otherwise, the building starts to camouflage itself, and we wanted to have a coming out party, if you will, so that the building appears new and as a whole, and the best way to do that, we felt, was having same awning type, same awning fabric finish consistently throughout, and that's been a strong point.
I think that would be preferable, if I may, but we'll get to that later. The other, one other thought I just had, we've had a recent application that's actually being nominated, I think, for potentially recognition.
Well, we have to
on
see how it
Bluefield
comes
Avenue.
out.
I'm sorry?
We have to see how it
Yeah,
comes out.
Oh, yeah. On Bluefield Avenue, there's a building with the same facade material, I believe, a terracotta, that's currently has been reviewed by one of our subcommittees. So at some point in this meeting, maybe we could share, or however it's appropriate, information about that. Might be beneficial for you.
I don't have any questions.
I do. Backing up what David has said, the two columns that these are the two columns in the front that you intend to continue down with the cast stone, correct?
I just want to make sure we're looking at the same thing.
And only those two?
So
In
you
the
were just
center.
pointing at this one and this one, right?
Right.
Yes.
Are those the only two? Are there any on the southern facade?
Those are intact. The original
Right.
on this, yeah. So there's no need to alter. We have no plans to alter any of the other existing historic fabric. It's just recreating these two pilasters.
And so that's what you intend to clad with cast stone?
Yes.
Okay. And my other question is the condition of the terracotta. Is part of your application to clean and do any repair work? Because it seems as though
Yes.
it needs some.
It does, and that's part of the exercise we would have to go through as we attempt to match properly. We are planning to clean and repoint all the glazed terracotta.
And what is the existing across the top? What material? Is that? It looks like...
That thick band.
Right.
Yeah, that is bent metal. It's just heavy gauge flashing.
Right.
That's how they capped. It's a very, these pilasters project several inches, so that was their solution, just create a very deep metal cap.
Is there any thought to do anything with that?
It's, again, something that was entertained as a what if, but it is not part of the scope of the project.
Painted or?
Like painting the metal cap, the coping? Well, I think it looks like it could use a little refresher of paint, if that's what you mean, yeah.
Well, I just wondered if you were going to do anything to it.
We weren't going to change it, but
Right.
I think it could certainly maybe be cleaned a bit and painted.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I don't have a question. Just a comment about the projecting
right.
signs. How would that work in conjunction with the awnings? I think they would sort of compete with each other, and you might not even be able to see
That's
that,
right.
so-
Yep. There's a potential conflict that the awnings would block the signs. That's another reason to kind of wait to see how it would work out. I think that we have a lot of head height, as I mentioned, particularly in the middle bay and the bay closer to Bistro 18. So the blade sign could actually be under the awning.
Or above.
It could be above, but then does it start to block the signage, the sign itself for the business?
Mr. Rudy?
And there are different kinds of blade signs too. Sometimes they say something, but sometimes it's a logo or it's an object, like a cobbler would have a shoe. So the legibility changes depending on what's proposed for a blade sign.
We work on it.
Just a couple of questions. The exterior lights, have you lettered that number of lights?
We recognized, we saw the note. We We could reduce the number if that was important to the commission.
Well, I
Yes.
just think that normally when you put something out there, things in the odd numbers work better. Instead of 4.
Yeah. Perhaps 3? Yes. Yes.
Is the floor, the first floor, is that all one level, or does it step?
It does periodically step. Some of these units are in plane with each other, but as you go to the south, they do start to step more and more.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Because of the storefront.
Yep.
Because when you're inside the atrium, or whatever it's called,
Yeah.
everything looks level.
Yeah.
And how do they manage?
Yeah, no, literally, they do step, and that was a big question for us in proposing the inverted corner at the Crescent. In Fullerton, we had to confirm with the grade outside and where the floor is presently, if we wanted them to align, are we going to end up with a pitch that meets code? And we do. It looks like the historic condition there hasn't changed much from whatever the original sidewalk was and the floor today.
Right. And that's it, other than low-E glass.
Yes, definitely.
I have one more question. Your awnings, it seems like they have a fixed skirt, a framed skirt.
Yeah.
Have you considered a loose skirt? So-
We have, and the thinking on that was that a loose skirt was a little too casual, because we feel we're going for a storefront that's a little more plainer, a little more sleek, that a rigid apron as opposed to one that was moving would be better. But we haven't revisited that in a while, and if that was the one thing that was holding up approval, I perhaps I can certainly talk to the building owner about it. But that was the reason why we're showing rigid. We thought holding a crisp edge would make the building look a little more tailored and fine.
Yeah, my husband particularly liked the crisp edge.
Well, can I just ask one question about,
Did I get through all the questions?
did everyone ask all their questions? So my only question was that in the original building, there were finials above the tops of the pilasters. There was a articulated contrast of heights, playing along with the rhythm.
Yes.
And have you given any consideration to any kind of return to a finial of any sort, or anything that would kind of undulate and create some more relief to the top?
So the building owner, who's had the property for several years, does have a master plan, if you will, and we'll talk a little bit about that with the painting question that came up for the north and west facades. Down the line is a consideration to look at that. It's not part of this application, but it's certainly on the radar.
Now, the building across the street that has the pet store that just opened, I've always admired the finials. I think it just brings a certain degree of interest.
Yes, I agree.
So, where are we at?
Comments?
Deliberation.
Right. All right, so now have we touched on most of everything that has been in Mr. Conley's memo? All right, so, Ms. Gillette, moving on to deliberation and comments about this application, how it's presented. Mr. Smith, are you changing anything according to, with Tom's comments?
Based on the feedback we just heard?
Mm-hmm. Or just from what the comment that
Before you
he
came.
gave you as far as priors, or?
I just want to make sure I understand the question. Well,
Would you consider any of the suggestions?
okay.
Is the question.
I got it. We feel strongly about A, but recognize, the commission and Tom have a viewpoint on that. I think that the exterior lights, D, we can go from 4 to 3 lights.
May I just interrupt for a second about the lights and a few other, just a different way of approaching this? I think that we can maybe summarize our comments relative to this and give him suggestions moving forward as opposed to asking him one by one if he would do the things in the memo.
Yeah, I think it's.
Like, for example, the lights, I would just ask for a study or more information because I'm not so sure that this is the light, the correct type of light, the shape of light you're going to get from, I'm not clear which one you've suggested to propose or how many would be appropriate because there isn't enough information on the one you're proposing.
So Jenny, let me just stop
Yeah.
you really quickly.
Yeah.
I think
I'd
it does
make
make
a-
sense to just go through the memo and
Okay.
see what he does want to do, because after that, we're not talking to the applicant anymore. We're deliberating
Okay.
amongst ourselves about what conditions we would put in if we did want to approve with changes. So I
So
think
just
it makes
what
sense.
he's
that
already
I would
ready
just
to
go
do.
through and say
Okay.
what
Okay.
he would be willing to do, and then we can deliberate.
Can I, given the, if we're doing that, that seems kind of important, can I just check in with the building owner about a couple of details before I misrepresent or
Sure.
misstate? Can we turn these off while we do that?
That's okay. We'll cover our ears.
Oh, my goodness. Pull up a chair, you're just in time for deliberation.
Join the fun.
Can he eavesdrop?
Can we talk?
What?
We allowed to talk?
What if one of the Awnings, and he doesn't want to do it? Well, that's what I said.
That way.
Okay, we are ready when you are. Thank you for giving us a chance to deliberate.
Okay, we're back on the record, 9:30.
I'll just go through each item. A, we do feel strongly about our approach and would prefer to maintain it. B, we feel we've addressed in explaining how we developed the storefronts, restoring both verticality and horizontally to the facade. C, I think I've addressed that as well, why there's differentiation between certain bays. D, we will look at reducing from 4 to 3 and doing the appropriate photometric studies to confirm the quantity, and as well as the light fixture specification. But there's a commitment there to reduce the number of fixtures.
If I may interject, that could also be addressed through the revisions committee as well.
Oh, okay. That we're very comfortable with that. E, we did not address as a group. What I can add to the conversation, this is about the slope of the proposed new awnings. I've spoken about the importance of maintaining certain kinds of regularity and modularity. At the south end of the building, our apron is 8 feet from the grade, and it's more like if we left that height heading to the north, it ends up being about 13 feet above grade, and that's one reason we lowered the awning at Bistro 18, so it could provide proper coverage and protection from sun and rain, pedestrians, and the interior space for diners. But the thing is, if we lower the slope of the awning, we'd have to do it for all of them, and at the south end, since we're already 8 feet, we're approaching what the code, I think Graham can maybe confirm this, I believe the awning can be no less than 7 feet above a sidewalk. So we kind of like the flatter pitch of the awnings, but there's also just sort of a geometric limit to how much more we could slope them because of that sloping sidewalk. So it's a point of information. We have no reason to change the slope. I just wanted to let you know why it is what it is. Removal of the second, removal of second floor battens. Because 33% of them are functional, we think it's best not to remove them, but to clean, fix, repaint them. G, I don't believe this came up. I hope I didn't misspeak, but we were not intending to paint the frames of the existing second floor windows. The H, yes, we will be cleaning and repointing the existing masonry facade. I, yes, with a condition. I think I mentioned this master plan that the property owner has. They can commit to this, but their plan was not to do this work until the storefront was completed, and they were looking at 2020 for that work. J, yes, we will consider the crenellation not as part of this application, but as it notes here, possible future applications.
Okay. So what are the conditions then that we have? Graham, you've listed some.
Well, yeah, we have to deliberate.
I just wanted to see what we had already. Okay. No.
I just wanted to recommend a little bit of additional comments to how you were planning on addressing. I think I already gave 1 or 2 of them away, which is that I'd like for you to study the shape of the light that's being cast with those lights. I'm not at all convinced that that's the best solution, but I would, just want to learn a little more before I make a recommendation based on that, and suggest you study the same. And then to the point of E, and in general to my first question, was that I do believe doing a little study and research into the sun and the shading conditions would help you design the angle of the awning, the location of the awning with a little bit more rigor. I understand the constraints, or I should say I understand what your clients might like, and I would also suggest the atrium is going to provide, the one that you're getting rid of would be is going to do something totally different than what this would do. So their existing concerns about heating loads and things like that are going to be different than what you're proposing now. So I just would recommend both of those things being studied before seeing how that might change your design. And I guess to that effect, Graham's sort of clarification earlier about the signs, the sign band and things like that, I would also just ask you to study. I know you had said the 13 feet high, the awning. I would say it would be an interesting study to see, and would get to some of these questions about reinforcing horizontality if we could see and understand more clearly what it would be like to keep consistency across that facade. We only just have your assessment that was inappropriate for that corner, but I believe it would be more in keeping with the historic presentation from the photos to be consistent across that facade at those levels. So I can take your word that the implications weren't great, but I would like to actually see a study of that as well. That's all.
Next up. First of all, I want to say, in general, this is a vast improvement over what's there now. So I think, you guys are doing a great job. So all this is just little details and things we get concerned about. I feel strongly the piers should match. Period. I would suggest that the base of below the windows is not stucco. That's the first thing that's going to get beat up over time, and is not such a great material to have as a base where people kick it and walk along and so on. I'm not going to suggest what it is, but I don't know about. I would suggest not stucco. I feel strongly that the awnings should all line up, and the sign bands should line up. And I would just note one of the pictures you have on HP1 has a sign 13 feet off the ground, and I can see it from way across the street here. So that's it. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Greenbaum.
So I'm a little frustrated by, not frustrated, I think there's an opportunity here to present the plan kind of, you've hinted at that there's a phased approach here. You want to get the storefront facade completed before addressing other aspects on the second floor. Even if you weren't prepared to go ahead with the construction of those modifications on the second floor, it would be helpful to be able for us to look at it more holistically rather than piecemeal. So while your intentions are to do it in phases, it would probably be ideal to see the whole thing as it's fully realized, as you envision it in its ideal. So that would be my first point, is I would love to be able to understand what you intend to do in the next phases as part of the larger project. How we write that, I'm not sure. I agree with my colleague John that there's a certain delicacy and lightness to the reveals of the original piers, and I'm not quite sure the statement of it adds to the facade. I prefer the reveals that the consistency on the piers of the building from the upper level to continue down. I also agree that the awnings ideally should line up on a single plane. I made mention also of the finials. It would be my preference to see that returned, some kind of decorative ornamentation above the piers. That would be my preference, keeping with the historic element, the historic property. The stucco that you referred to for the bulkhead below the windows, I just want to make it clear that shouldn't be, this is just a technical, shouldn't be FS material. It should be a hardback. Whatever surfacing you're using should be hardback. Shouldn't be foam with any spray. As we know, that's not something desirable. I didn't think that was your intention, but just to cover yourself, cover us. I want that in there. It'd be nice to see perhaps some of that arcuation as you refer to it, in the bulkhead in some way, something to, as opposed to, it would be nice to see if that could be explored. And the other point I just want to make is, in terms of your signage, again, I want to bring up the point that the sign band, while I understand looking at it on paper is attractive, the view of the vehicular and pedestrian traffic is running perpendicular to that. And so I really think that if you have an issue of the conflict between the sign band and blade signs, I would suggest that the blade sign would be more practical for the benefit of your tenants, and also and your the crescent sign is quite attractive, and maybe you could play off that. Not to say that you shouldn't have a sign ban, but I wouldn't let that undermine the blade signs, just based on the traffic pattern. My only last point was, it would be ideal if the second floor windows were in some, maybe by, in some way or another through painting, to make them less, look less as if they were infilled. If there's a way to integrate that better. I understand you said that there's some, I'm guessing some mechanicals and things that prevent you from going back to the full-size window. But if there's a way to kind of address it to mitigate any contrast there that's unnecessary, that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Overall, I agree with Commissioner Reimans that this application is a vast improvement to the existing. So I do look forward to the completion of this project. I do agree, with respect to the pilasters, that they should mirror the existing, especially considering the fact that there are two original full-length pilasters that are going to have that indent, and then on the other side of the building. So I think just for consistency purposes, I think it makes sense to mirror. I also agree that with respect to the height of the awnings and the sign bands, I think consistency makes sense. And also that it makes sense to incorporate blade signs, just because, given the existence of the shade trees, the awnings, pedestrian and vehicle traffic on that side of the street, it's going to be difficult to see the sign band. So I think the blade signs make sense. And if you're going to do that, I think it's okay to bump up the Bistro 18 awning and sign to be even with the other signs. And I think something does need to be done regarding the second floor backer panels, whether you want to paint to match what you're doing with the stucco on the first floor, or try and have it match the second floor terracotta a little bit better. The existing color, it's a little bit off, and I think if you're going to be doing some work on the first floor and there's going to be that contrast, the second floor should be addressed as well, in addition to the I guess metal cap. Those are all the comments I had.
Okay. I agree with my colleagues here that the columns, I would like to see the columns replicate the historic columns. I think those are really the bones of the building, and I think the storefront infill, to do something modern there, would be fine, and I think what you've designed is absolutely appropriate. I don't mind the stucco bulkheads. But I do think the continuity of the columns from the top to the bottom is an important thing to do. I also think it would be better to align the signs across the entire base of the building. While it's much taller at one end than the other end, I don't think it's a freakishly tall storefront, but I think the storefront at the other end is unusually squat. So I think it'll all balance itself out in the end. I would like to see awnings with a loose skirt, because I think the ones with the rigid skirt recall the enclosed atrium awning more than they do a traditional fabric awning. And I am not a fan of these light fixtures. I think they project too much, and in one of these views, the first view, when you see the raking view of them, it's just, there are too many of them and they're too long. So I would suggest considering a shorter light fixture, a concealed cove light, backlit letters like Mr. Connolly suggested. Any of those other options might work, or a traditional gooseneck that doesn't project as deeply. Let's see what I think that covers what my concerns were, and I think it's a wonderful first step, and it's, part of an incremental change. I'm not concerned about having you show us now what you're going to do later, because that's not what this proposal is, and I don't think we can
No.
compel you to do it, but it's,
Right. They'd have
we'd
to
like to
come back.
encourage you in the future to do it, but I'm not concerned about
Right.
not being able to see it right now.
Thank you.
Mr. Rooney?
Well, I agree that this is a huge, important step to this building, and it's, bravo for you for doing it. Everybody's comments are good. I'd like to see eventually someday that you do the rest of the building, but I understand you can't do that now. That's it.
Okay, and I would just like to add the metal across the top that I spoke about before, that somehow that be addressed, either painted, cleaned up, or, because it looks like it's
Cornice?
in, yeah, is that what
Yeah.
you consider cornice? I don't know.
It's a cornice.
Yeah. Okay, now,
So now let's deliberate about what conditions we want.
okay, so,
So, if you have the list, we can go over what people recommend.
He-
Graham has
yeah,
the list.
why don't you,
It's part of my secretarial duty.
Yes.
I'm just making sure that I have everything copied over. Okay, so here's the final list of conditions that sounded unanimous, and there were two that had some varying opinions, so I just wanted to mention those as well. So the first is that the proposed pier bulkheads, piers are to match the existing on the building. The signs and awnings are to be aligned horizontally across the facade. The applicant is to incorporate blade signs, and then I wrote particularly for the taller storefronts, is that, or we can just say, just incorporate
I
blade
think
signs.
they should just incorporate
Okay.
blade signs.
So we'll talk that now. The batten panels above are to be painted to match the coloring of the existing building. The number of lights above the signage is to be reduced from 4 to 3, and the final selection of the fixtures and photometrics should be reviewed by the HPC, and that can be delegated to the revisions committee.
revision, okay.
The metal coping and cornice is to be painted and cleaned. The terracotta on the building is to be cleaned and repaired as well. And then the 2 points that I did not hear unanimous consent upon were the materiality for the bulkhead. I heard an okay with stucco, and then a shouldn't be stucco, so I wanted to, there should be a motion, I guess, on that to decide if that should be a condition or not. Or
Well, let's just address the list.
Oh,
that you
the
said
initial
that-
list, sorry.
The initial
Mhm.
list
Mhm.
that you believed was
Yeah, the-
unanimous. Did anybody have an issue with any of those conditions
Mm-mm.
being imposed if there is a motion to approve
The list
the
that
application?
he just
that was
recited.
the
Yes.
initial first list.
The initial first list that he believed was unanimous.
I have just a general question. Is it our purview to comment on things that they're not proposing to do? Like
What?
cleaning the, because I can imagine cleaning the building, doing the top, none of that is work that
Well,
they're.
didn't-
Well, that was part of the conditions, right?
Right.
Yeah. Because if they're doing work on a portion of the facade,
Okay.
we can ask
Well,
them
the
to
applicant did
address
testify that they would be
other
cleaning.
Right.
portions
Okay,
of it.
okay.
So,
Correct.
Yeah, the glazed terracotta, cleaned and repointed.
Mhm.
There is a plan, not as part of this application, but there is, if you wanted to record it as a fact, there is a plan to execute on the paint for the north and west facades in terms of cleaning and repainting those facades in 2020.
Mhm.
But
And-
it's not part of this proposal.
No.
Part of
It-
this.
It's not.
Right.
It's
And
not part
can I-
of this work.
The other one that you didn't hear consensus, was that about the skirt of the?
The loose skirt of the
On the
awnings,
awning,
correct.
okay. So, we have,
So
could you go
those-
through those again,
So the
Graham?
two outstanding conditions that we did not have consensus on were the materiality for the bulkhead below the storefronts, and then whether there should be loose skirts or frame skirts.
I think the bulkhead below the windows should be a different material. Traditionally, it's a different material. Traditionally, it's stone beneath glass, so just a hard surface that can take some abuse,
Can I
not stucco.
kindly remind the commission that there are examples of buildings from the period that have cementitious stucco, the Hink building at the corner of Church and South Fullerton, Bloomfield being the prime example. And our office has done previous work approved by this commission, 573, 575 Bloomfield Avenue, the Gelato Place on the corner of Midland and Bloomfield has stucco. It's true cementitious stucco. It's held up quite well there as well.
Yeah,
As a hint.
I have no issue with it as long as it's a traditional stucco, not synthetic. Like a
Will be
three-part traditional
Okay.
stucco.
The traditional
I'll
cementitious
back off
stucco.
that. Yeah, there's a hard surface behind it.
Okay.
So, do we
agree.
want to impose that as a condition, that it's a traditional
stucco.
hard surface?
Trowel
Stucco.
stucco.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
Okay. And then the other was the loose skirt.
I think, Mike, I think that's a very good point that Caroline made. By the way, I want to compliment, I love the fact that you're doing open-sided awnings as opposed to, it's infinitely lighter, and I think it's excellent choice here. I kind of agree with Caroline that you have the basic form. One thing you might do is have them sew in a rod sleeve, and that would give it that rigidness without, it still have some lightness and flexibility, but you do want to keep that space as open looking as possible, having just, I think one of the issues that you've had is it was closed in, and that's one of the reasons you're opening it. So I think her instincts are correct, to have it less rigid and softer. Since the building is so hard, it's nice to have a little bit of a softness, Sometimes they do like scallops and things like that on the skirt, decorative. I'm not suggesting a specific, but I think that's,
If I follow, you're talking about not having the skirt be completely loose, but at its bottom edge
Have a
sewn into a
weighted
seam,
edge.
like a rod to weight it.
Yes.
So it sort of holds its shape but moves a little.
yeah. I think
that what you're
might,
describing?
I think that might address, I think, your concern, that you had mentioned there was a concern, and at the same time,
Yeah, I think there's something to that myself. I mean,
okay.
thank
go
you
ahead.
for suggesting it.
Okay.
Would that work?
Why not?
It's done.
So the condition then would be that the awning edge have a weight along the bottom,
Or we can just say the final selection of the awning will be reviewed by the HPC.
by the revisions committee.
Yes.
All right, final selection of awning.
But it's not part of the rigid frame of the actual awning itself.
Right,
Right.
okay. So, we have the conditions.
Graham, can you
And-
just recite the conditions for the record?
Sure.
And then I'll make.
So the proposed new piers are to match the existing. All signs and awnings are to align horizontally on the facade. The applicant's to incorporate blade signage for the building. The batten upper second floor panels are to be painted to match the existing building coloring. The number of lights above each sign is to be reduced from 4 to 3, with the final selection of the light fixture to be reviewed by the HPC. The metal coping and cornice at the top of the building is to be painted and/or cleaned. The terracotta surface of the building is to be cleaned and repaired or repointed. The bulkhead is to be finished in a true 3-coat stucco, and that the final selection of the awnings with a weighted skirt is to be reviewed by the HPC.
I make a motion to approve the
One
application.
question before there's a second. The requirement for blade signage, are you saying that we have no blade signs designed, the tenants don't know that's coming? What kind of requirement is that? Meaning, at some point down the road, they'll be introduced? Or are you saying the application cannot be approved unless the applicant guarantees and provides as part of whatever happens next, blade signs? I mean, I think they're very interested in it, but it feels like you're requiring that.
I think what we
Right
were
now.
trying to say is that we would like to see blade signs. I think they would be appropriate, but
Yes.
that has to do with the signage committee.
Yeah, the signage, which would be revisions.
It's revisions.
Yeah, it
Well,
would come back to.
It would really go to the minor application committee. which
Minor
would do the
application.
Whatever. Not me.
I don't think it should be a requirement as part of our motion.
No.
I don't think it should be, it's one of those things I can't, they're
It
not
co-
proposing it.
It seems,
How can they design it? They don't have tenants.
Right.
right, but I do think that maybe part of we could say that we want to see consistency in the signage as part of, from tenant to tenant, to create a uniform signage language for the property. Is that something would people be comfortable incorporating?
Well, that's what's presented in these plans.
Yeah.
And
Right.
administratively, when a signage application comes in, it must comply with what's been presented here. This is a storefront plan, so every minor application that we receive for signage, for new tenants, change of tenants, will be evaluated against this storefront plan to make sure it conforms and is consistent with what was presented here.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
how we function
So-
and operate.
So how, are you
No,
saying-
you
So
said
that
the
establishes that
Sorry,
consistency
yeah.
that you're looking for. This is setting the precedent for where any sign can be located or placed on the
but the
building.
blade sign issue is not, if we don't formalize that in some form,
That can be reviewed on a case-by-case basis by the minor application committee for its appropriateness, and if there's not consensus there, it comes back to this full body for review of installation of the blade sign.
So this, I just want something in the approval so that when we do go back to it,
So we could
that
just say,
it-
change the language
blade
that
signs were
the
a
applicant
consideration.
should consider incorporation of blade signs.
Yeah,
And
consider,
it's not-
that's good.
because
It's
that
not a
was part of the
requirement,
reason
but for
why
them to
we were
contemplate it as
okay
part
of
with
their
raising the
design
awning
solution.
and raising the
Right.
bistro.
it's a win-win. It's just, it seems intuitive, but
So we can just say consider.
Okay. It was really procedural, I just didn't want
Mhm.
a certificate
Right.
of appropriateness to be withheld until the blade sign showed up on the building, for example.
Right.
Right.
Oh, no, we want you to go
So with
ahead.
the understanding that the intent is to.
Right.
Okay.
So
Thank
just
you.
read that back again.
Yeah, so the applicant should consider incorporation of blade signage into the building.
Right, okay.
So just
All
consider
right,
it.
Jason.
I move to approve the applications with the conditions as recited by Mr. Petto.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you for a very professional presentation. I'm just feeling that Kleenex in case, I don't know.
Do we have a
I think,
starry night?
Kathleen, should we take a break, 5-minute break?
Like, why do you say it's a done deal? I don't believe it. Unless you know something I don't know. I even said the fourth ward. You weren't at the meeting. There was no one on the fourth ward.
Ready?
Remember how they always used to come for my.
Okay. It's 10:05. It's our second application of the night. This is a referral from the Planning Board, application 2582, 33-37 Orange Road, presented by HP 37 Orange Road, Montclair LLC. The subject property is located in the Montclair Center Gateway Phase 1 redevelopment plan, is not located in the Town Center Historic District. As noted in Montclair Ordinance Section 7.4 Site Plan and Subdivision Review of the Plan, the site application plan shall also be submitted to the Township of Montclair Historic Preservation Commission for review in an advisory capacity to the Planning Board. Property is located in the Montclair Center Gateway Phase 1 redevelopment plan. Gateway Phase 1 includes 11 contiguous tax lots with frontage on Bloomfield Avenue, Valley Road, and Orange. The main goal of this redevelopment plan is to allow for flexibility in the construction of commercial and residential properties, as well as a hotel, along an important stretch of Bloomfield Avenue and the intersecting streets, the gateway to downtown Montclair. The redevelopment plan establishes a maximum building height of 6 stories with the exception of 8 stories granted to the MC Hotel. The HPC is reviewing this proposal due to its close proximity to the locally listed Town Center Historic District. In Barton Ross's report, which is also included within our packet, and everyone should have read that, as per section 2.3.3 design of the 2010 redevelopment plan, certain design parameters should be followed. These include reinforcing the eclectic and historic sense of plan of space in Montclair Center by requiring new buildings to harmonize with its scale and character. So can we have, who is going to present tonight? And we'll have you sworn in.
Sure. So thank you, Kathleen. So I'm Tom Troutner from Chiesa, Shahenian, and John Tomasi, attorney for the applicant. We have Stuart Johnson tonight from Minnow and Wasco, and we also have Ed Wilkes from Langen Engineering. Stuart will speak to the architectural components, and Ed will speak to site engineering, some brief overview of that.
Okay,
So-
all right. And being that Mr. Angelo's not here, I'll swear you in. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and only but the truth concerning this application?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And could you just identify yourselves individually again?
Sure. So, Stuart Johnson, I'm a principal with Minnow and Wasco Architects and Planners. I'm a registered architect licensed here in the state of New Jersey. I'm the architect for the project.
Okay.
My name is Ed Wilkes. I'm a senior project manager with Langen Engineering. I am the civil engineer on this project.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Troutner, we know, is the attorney for this project. So you're going to go through a PowerPoint, and I would just ask you to keep your presentation as brief as possible so that we can have questions and discussions.
So on the easel here are 2 exhibits. These are two illustrative renderings of the proposed project. They will also be in my presentation in the PowerPoint, but for ease of visibility, I figured I would also put that up here for the group. So we're excited to be here in front of this commission tonight to present this project. The project consists of 2 lots. It is lot 19, which is 0.21 acres, and lot 20, which is 0.43 acres, block 1404. The site has frontage on Orange Road as well as Central Verde Drive here to the south. Just to orient everyone, I know you're familiar with the site, but you have Bloomfield Avenue to the north. You have Valley Road here to the east, Orange Road here to the west, and Central Verde Drive there to the south. So the image on screen here is an aerial satellite image of the subject property. If we advance the slide here, the red dashed arrow shows the 2 lots of the property that we're presenting here to the group this evening. Again, you can see the frontage on both Orange Road and Central Verde Drive. You can see adjacent to the property is a multi-level hotel, which is the MC Hotel, which this commission is, I'm sure, familiar with. That's under construction presently. Immediately to the south is the Orange Road parking deck, which is a multi-level parking deck structure. And to the east are the 2 residential apartment buildings with ground floor retail that are approximately 6 stories, are the Valley and Bloom apartment buildings. If we advance the slide here, there are 4 images. These are each a bird's eye aerial view of the site, just to show greater context of the the existing adjacent structures as well as the property that we're looking at. So in the top image, the property is located here. In the next image, you can see the property located this way, facing Orange Road, behind the 2 Valley and Bloom apartment buildings. Again, the property here facing Orange Road, adjacent to the structured parking deck. And lastly, on this image. If we advance the slide here, this is an aerial image that drops in our proposed building plan. This is a roof plan of our building. It shows some of the amenitized roof decks and the green roof features that we're proposing for this building. but you get a sense of the massing of this building, or at least the site location of this building. I'll provide further testimony and description of the proposed project, but you can see here really this project we're excited about. It really becomes that connective last piece of the puzzle, if you will, to this block, and provides for a connective pedestrian corridor along the streetscape here of Orange Road, turning the corner onto Centro Verde Drive, creating a connective pedestrian path along the block here within the gateway and within the downtown of Montclair. The project as proposed is a 4-story structure. It is 3 levels of residential over a ground floor level of off-street parking, residential lobby space, and a boutique retail space that's located here on the corner, which is approximately 2,300 square feet. That retail space right now is being marketed as a food hall space that would have approximately 5 or 6 small food vendors that would likely partner up with some of the local restaurant groups or food providers within the area. As shown here, that space has the opportunity to provide some outdoor seasonal cafe dining along the storefront glazing in front of that space. One of the unique features of this site is we have a 15-foot front yard setback that's required, and the lot line is actually set back from the curb of the road by approximately 10 feet or greater, which allows for this public plaza space in front of our building. So we've taken a great step here to design this public plaza with a combination of hardscape and raised planters to provide some architectural and landscape interest, as well as some seating areas. A unique feature as well you see is a small drop-off, or sort of kiss and ride drop-off area in front of the building with some decorative lit bollards that would provide for short-term drop-off. There is a dedicated loading area which is provided as a pull-off off of Centro Verde Drive. So looking at this building here, the primary residential entrance is located here in the center of the building. We have storefront glazing that fronts on Orange Road and also turns the corner onto Centro Verde. The vehicular garage entrance is at the left-hand side of the site here, which is actually immediately adjacent to the garage entrance for the hotel adjacent. So site-wise, that makes that makes a lot of sense. And then vertically, as you go above that first floor, you can see the 3 levels of residential. So the building as proposed is 46 residential apartment units that consist of 1, 2, and a small number of 3-bedroom units. I think there's actually 1 3-bedroom unit for the project, and some studio units. We feel that this is a great opportunity for not only empty nesters, but also young professionals to live within the downtown. The site has great proximity to mass transit, as well as the local shops and retail within the downtown. So if you advance the slide here, this is a view looking west along Orange Road. So this features the intersection of Orange Road and Centro Verde Drive. This is really sort of the detailed feature image of that boutique retail space. So again, you can see that storefront glazing that wraps the corner. The first floor of the building has a ceiling height of approximately 14 feet, which allows for lots of light and glass along that street frontage. You can see the unique canopy design here that wraps this corner. This is a composite metal panel that's being used as an accent feature for that canopy. And taking note from one of the comments from the architectural review letter, we've actually integrated a composite wood cladding panel on the underside of this, and on the underside and the side features of this frame element as an accent element to offer some warmth, also to provide architectural variety and interest.
Where did that suggestion come from?
There was a comment from the architect review letter, I believe, that asked that we consider adding a wood tone material to the facade.
That's this. Barton's.
Barton. Right, okay.
So in the meantime, I can use the easel here. So we were just looking at the second image, which again is a feature image that shows the intersection intersection of Orange Road and Central Verde Drive. You can see the retail space at the corner, residential apartment units above. The exterior building materials being proposed on the project are a combination of manufactured cast stone veneer, which are being used at the base of the building, as well as coming up one story on that building. We're using a masonry brick veneer that then goes up on levels 2 and 3, and also on the corner tower element goes 4 stories. The upper portion of the building, we are using a fiber cement vertical panel that's being used with a reveal channel that would be painted black to add.
Could you point that out?
I'm sorry?
Could you?
Sure.
Okay.
So this is a vertical fiber cement siding panel that's used with a reveal trim. So there would be a black painted reveal trim that separates each one of those panels. It mimics the look of a composite metal panel and adds for architectural variety and interest. The building's also been designed to have what's called a base, middle, and top reading. So as you can see, we're using that lighter color on the 4th floor of the building to really give the look and feel of a 3-story massing with this lighter 4th floor in terms of the architectural material, I guess, that's being used there. If I advance the slide to talk about that plaza space that we were referencing, this is a rendered plan of the plaza space and a parcel ground floor plan. You can see the primary residential entrance is located here. There's a secure vestibule that would have an intercom system. You can see a few mechanical spaces adjacent to the garage entry. And the area in blue is the retail space, again, that would have storefront glazing that wraps that corner. You can see the area here that's been detailed for outdoor seasonal cafe dining. And it's hard to read, but you can see that this line here is the property line, which is already set back from the curb. And we have approximately 15 to 15.5 feet from the property line to the building face. But the overall depth of this plaza is 20 plus feet. Our engineer can provide further detail regarding that plaza and the design of it and the raised planters. But we feel it's a very attractive design feature to this project and also provides a human scale design element to this building, and again provides a welcoming and inviting space within the ground level of the building. So quickly, just to walk you through the building plan, the ground floor use again is off-street parking. This is private structured parking intended for the residents. We have 67 parking spaces total provided on site. That is a combination of mechanical stacking parkings as well as traditional surface parking spaces that are within that garage. We have 24 secure bicycle racks within this garage that are wall-mounted bicycle racks. The area in yellow here was our residential lobby with elevators here for vertical circulation.
Excuse me, could you show us the facades? We're really interested in the times of the...
Okay. So quickly, I just wanted to walk through the building plan to understand that the ground floor was not residential use, it was commercial and parking. The upper floors of the building are all residential use. We have a small outdoor courtyard space, and as we advance up, this is a typical double-loaded corridor. You'll see this is the rooftop plan. We have a small outdoor green space, and then that brings us to the building elevations. So the elevation we have on screen here is the existing streetscape elevation of Orange Road. So you can see the MC Hotel, which is being constructed now, which I believe is approximately 9 stories. You can see the current site. The property right now is a automotive repair facility as well as a gas station. There's a 1-story industrial space adjacent to the property, and you can see the 6-story Valley and Bloom apartment building beyond, and the Orange Road deck that's next to us. If I advance the slide here, you'll see the proposed elevation in the 4-story massing of the building that we are proposing. If we advance the slide here, we'll see the hotel and the adjacent property just to get an understanding of scale and context. And then this image drops in the adjacent Orange Road deck. And then lastly here you can see the Valley and Bloom apartment building that slips behind our building that's seen beyond. So from this elevation you can see that we are striving to use similar building materials to that of our neighbor as well as the downtown architecture. These are quality building materials. Through the use of the cast stone veneer at the base of the building, the masonry brick veneer, and then the fiber cement siding panels, we've created a base metal top reading to the building. The building's been articulated both vertically and horizontally. We have box bays that project out on the facade, on the front facade, as well as the side facade facing Centro Verde. We have a varied cornice line, as you can see along the roof of this building, with a featured tower element, which complies with the design standards within the redevelopment plan, in terms of creating feature elements for the gateway area of the downtown. The facade materials, which I'll get into in a little bit greater depth in just a minute, mimic that of the MC Hotel, and we're actually branding this project as the MC Residences. So we feel that it complements not only the hotel adjacent, but the other architecture within the downtown. This image here, again, shows us the streetscape elevation along Orange Road. It also shows you the streetscape elevation along Centro Verde Drive. So you can see the Valley and Bloom apartment building that's next to us. You can see how we step away from that building on our residential levels. We are proposing a 4-story building, which is in line with the massing of the building adjacent. The building adjacent was clearly designed to have a 4-story reading with 2 stories of residential that sit on top of that to make 6 stories. So again, we feel that we are harmonizing and we are in line with the other architecture found within the downtown fabric here. If I advance the slide here, these are detail elevations for our 2 exterior facing building elevations. So to provide a little bit further description to what I was describing earlier, we're using a manufactured cast stone veneer along the base of the building and the 1st story here on the street. Our masonry brick veneer is then being used. That's that grayish brown color that'll have a flash to it to offer range to that brick that's being used on the upper levels. We have 2 colors of vertical fiber cement siding panel that we're using. We have this lighter color that's being used here on the front elevation, as well as the side elevation that's Navajo beige, and then a slightly darker color, which is Monterey taupe. The darker bronze colors here at these box bays that project out are a composite metal panel for accent. We're proposing to use the same dark bronze that was used and approved on the hotel that's being used on the corner of that hotel. So you'll see some continuity there in regards to the materials being proposed on this project. Sure.
Is anyone else testifying this evening?
So we have Ed Wilkes here from Lang & Engineering, but I'm thinking in light of the hour, unless the commission has specific questions that he can answer, but we'll avoid a affirmative presentation.
Okay.
And my testimony is just about finished here. So this is a material sample board here that shows the brick veneer being proposed on the project, the cast stone that's being proposed at the base of the building, the 2 different Conair composite metal panels. The windows being proposed on the building are a Pella product. It's an aluminum-clad wood window. So this is the proposed color for that. You can see that the storefront glazing for the retail spaces in the lobby would match or be very similar to that being used for the aluminum-clad windows at the residential levels. And then in the center here, these are our 2 fiber cement siding panels, and this represents the composite wood cladding material that we would use as that accent material here on the underside of this frame. And lastly, you can see the garage door. This is a detail of the typical garage door that we would use, which is a open grill mesh to allow for light, air, and visibility to that garage. It's a quick action overhead garage door. And lastly, that takes us back to the illustrative perspective rendering. So that really concludes my presentation. Maybe I went into greater depth than you were looking to, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if either the commission or the public had.
Thank you.
Sure.
Maybe we should hear from, well, while you're still up, we have a question. We'll start
no, that was a very full presentation. Thank you. No questions.
I don't have any questions.
I have a question to my colleagues here. So this is basically referred to us by the planning board to review for appropriateness.
just
No,
recommendations.
it's a recommendation.
Recommendations, only because it's outside of the historic district,
It's in the redevelopment.
Yeah, the
Right.
language in the redevelopment plan requires that the application be referred here to this body for
Okay,
just
and
review
so-
and comment.
so all we're doing is providing recommendations to forward on to the
Planning board for
Planning
when they
board.
consider the
planning board.
application.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand.
Mhm.
If
So-
you want,
If we want to, if we have comments. Okay, so I have a question. I think I'll start it with a statement and then I'll ask a question. The statement is.
Just ask the question.
The use of the wooden material,
Yes.
are there other areas of the property, of the building, have you considered incorporating that elsewhere than just that single location?
We haven't. This project is a 4-story building. It's a 4-story massing. Again, compliant with the design standards in the redevelopment plan, we try to create a base metal top reading. So really, again, I'm making the architectural argument that it reads as a 3-story building with elements that project the 4 stories. The composite wood cladding material that we're using is a accent material, so we wanted to be selective about where we're using it. And based on the scale and proportion of the facade, I feel that if we were to use that wood cladding material in place of metal panel on these box bays would be overpowering of the facade, and again, wouldn't comply with the other architecture found within the downtown.
So it's limited just to the underside, kind of as a contrast underneath the metal cladding?
Correct. It's meant to be as a contrast or accent element that you would see. So as you were coming either north or south on Orange Road, either vehicularly or if you were pedestrian, you would experience this as you turn the corner. You would see it from multiple angles. So we feel that using that material at that corner feature element is something that would be experienced at multiple vantage points. It's not just seen from one face of the building or one aspect ratio.
Well, I have another question. I'm looking at the elevations here in black and white.
Sure.
Let's say Exhibit A08, and then I'm looking at a similar elevation but shown on the screen. Are there any variations between what I'm looking at here and what I'm looking at there?
You're seeing.
Is one a
Sure.
later version?
Sure. So this has a new date. This has a date of 11/29/2018. This is a color rendered version of what you have in front of you. The only differences are there was a comment in the architectural review letter that we had received that recommended that rather than a glass and metal door being used at the garage door, that we use a open mesh garage door. So we've revised the building elevations and the perspective renderings to reflect that, as well as the detail that I showed you on the material board. We've also revised the material callouts here and what's being shown in the render plan to show and call out the accent composite wood cladding that I referenced.
So when I look at the plan, because it's very hard
Right.
from the distance I'm looking at here,
Sure.
and that's why I want to make sure we're commenting on something that wasn't modified subsequent.
Right.
So I'm looking here and I see pilasters and relief on the fourth story. Is that going to be? Is there an actual relief there, the dimensionality on the elevation of the fourth floor, which is the stucco material?
So it's not a stucco material, it's a fiber cement vertical panel.
I think you pointed it out on the board.
So,
right. So I think the question is, so we are showing relief here. So we have relief left to right. So these are brick pilasters that do project out approximately 12 to 18 inches from the face of the fiber cement here. So we are providing relief upon that facade.
on the top floor.
We are, yes.
Okay. Let me ask you, hold on, I had a thought and I lost it. It'll come to me.
We'll move on.
Well, yeah.
And then if you
No,
recall. So I just wanted to confirm, because you said you did review the architect's letter and you made some changes pursuant to that. The architect did mention that there were vinyl windows in the residential units. You mentioned Pella. and it's gonna
Correct.
be
So I
wood
provided
now.
testimony, and if, I refer back to the building elevation that's here. We did update the material call out. We are now calling out the windows. I believe it's item number 10, or not item number 10, but item number 8. They are aluminum clad windows, and on our material call out sheet, we call them out as Pella Proline series. That's a quality window. It's an insulated window. It's a wood clad window, so it's an aluminum window on the cladding that we can match the storefront glazing, et cetera, on the facade to provide an attractive look.
And the fiber cement panels that are going to be utilized, that's only going to be on that top third?
So the fiber cement panels are being used here on this portion of the front elevation. And then on the side elevation fronting on Cincha Verde Drive, we're using 2 colors of the vertical fiber cement panel. We're using this lighter color here, the Navajo beige, and then the Monterey taupe being used here on the right-hand side of that facade.
That's all I have.
And this letter also refers to, it recommends using less of it. But then it also talks about, I guess, not using battens, but instead using some sort of channels to detail those fiber panels.
So I think those are 2 comments or 2 things that you highlighted. The last one, we're not proposing to use battens. Nowhere in my testimony or in my description, we're using the Hardy reveal system, which is what he's recommending in that. So he's recommending that we use a reveal trim piece that separates and fastens these panels to the facade. He's also recommending that they be primed and field painted, which we are also saying that we will do that. So we're proposing that those reveal trim pieces will be a black, which will provide a contrast to that reveal, and also architectural interest and work with the metal panel on the facade. The first comment, I architecturally disagree with the comment in regards to the fiber cement panels. I don't believe that that's the predominant material being used on these facades. And I think there was a comment about possibly using additional masonry brick veneer. And again, I think to create architectural interest and variety, and to break up the building horizontally and vertically as what's being shown here. So we have a horizontal reading, and then we also have a vertical reading that undulates along that facade. I think it's important to have a variety of building materials, short of adding a second brick color, which again, I think for the scale of the building would be inappropriate. I think the scale and percentage of materials is appropriate.
Is there any corbelling of any brickwork, any kind of decorative brickwork? I'm sorry, was there someone?
I would just open that. Steve.
Me. Could you describe a little bit more in detail about that fiber cement edge? Is there a gap between them?
So
Does it form a gap?
There is a gap. So it's a reveal trim piece that forms a gap in between it that acts as a reveal. So
is this only vertical or?
So it's vertical and horizontal. So panels come in 4x10 pieces that get trimmed, and it's probably easier to see on the rendering. But you would have seams here. You'd have reveal seams being used on these panels as they're installed on the facade.
Another question?
Yeah. So I apologize if you were the architect of Valley and Bloom. I don't know.
I was not the architect
Okay.
of Valley and Bloom.
I think.
And I would also say that architecturally, I feel that this building differs vastly from the architecture of Valley and Bloom. But that's my architectural opinion.
Okay. Well, one of the things that is very disturbing to me about that particular project, and what we spent a lot of time this evening talking about in that earlier project, was the scale of the storefronts. That this earlier project had one very tall storefront. Valley and Bloom, they're all really, really tall. And it's very hard to tell from the rendering what the scale of these storefront openings are in relation to the pedestrians, because that Valley and Bloom is just off.
So if I bring us back to this was sort of the blow-up or detailed rendering of the corner there of Orange Road and Centro Verde Drive. One of the features that we've done with our storefront is we've broken the storefront up. So we have transom windows that we're using at the upper level. We have doorways and openings into the spaces that are approximately 8 feet in height, vary between 8 feet and 10 feet as a head height for those doors. I believe architecturally, if you look at this facade, there's a human scale to the streetscape of this facade. And I think through the design of the transom windows and the horizontal datum lines that are being created here in the brick pilasters, that the scale of the storefront is appropriate. I think there's a reason why within the redevelopment plan they talk about the design standards and welcoming and inviting, attractive ground floor area that feels welcoming. I think that the glazing that's being shown here will be a attractive and well-lit space throughout the day and the early evening, and will provide an inviting and attractive plaza space along the streetscape.
May I ask, is that first floor of a 14-foot ceiling, or?
There is. So there's a 14-foot ceiling to the underside of the structure within that first floor.
Mm-hmm.
So the head height of the glazing here is approximately at 12.5 to 13 feet, because you would have a drop ceiling for mechanicals. So the ceiling space within that retail space may be approximately 12 feet high. It may vary in certain areas if you have exposed ducting. That depends on the design of the interior of the space.
Okay, thank you. Did you have one more question?
Actually, I have two.
Okay.
And I thought of the first one that I had forgotten, and that is the setback between the where the brick ends and you go with the fiber cement facade above.
The fiber cement, yes.
Yeah. What is the depth there between the two face surfaces?
So this is so this material here is a precast element, so it's a precast lintel that's being used there for the cornice. That does step. I don't have the exact dimension, but as you can see, there is relief there. It does project out approximately 2 inches, and then corbels. So I would say it ranges between a 2 to 4 inch projection from those brick piers on that face.
But
I don't know if that answers your question,
but
specifically you're referring to this corbelling or this cornice line here, right? This detail?
Well, what I'm trying to understand is there a true step back? I'm looking at it there, right? You have a sense of the top of the corbelling, the top of the cornice, right, where it meets
right there.
With the.
Sure.
What is
sure.
that depth?
So right now you have a 12-inch. It's approximately 12 to 14 inches here. The depth of this projection of the facade from the plane behind it.
Yeah.
So you have that, and then the cornice here at that third floor level is between a 2 and 4 inch projection as it is a built up
so it's like
piece.
16 inches at that point, roughly.
In totality, from the edge of that cornice or the edge of that.
Right. Do you have another question?
Well, no, the other one was relating to corbelling and brickwork. Is there any other examples of relief on the brickwork?
Well, so it's hard to tell. You could maybe see it better in this rendering, but we are showing, it's not brick corbelling, but we're showing some brickwork. We have some soldier coursing that's being used here as a accent detail right at the underside of the cornice. That soldier detail is also being used again up here. And at the top of this window here, we have a brick detail pattern that's being used in the facade. We do have at the base to give kind of a capital. Traditionally pilasters have a base and a middle and a cap. We do have some corbelling that's being used here to create a base reading of those pilasters. But the corbelling has been used to. It's not been overdone on this facade. Again, not to take away from everything else that's going on with this facade in terms of the various architectural moves and the materials being used.
We just to check. So he presented.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone had an opportunity.
I didn't ask
questions.
I didn't.
You did, but you have more. Okay, but I was going to say you should see if we have recommendations or not now.
Okay. I just have.
Everyone went.
Right. But I didn't ask a question. I want to ask about the wood around the corner. Is it the color of the wood?
Yes.
That's the infill. You presented it as orange. Is that?
So it's not I wouldn't describe it as orange, but there are obviously orange tones. This is the wood material, and this is the selection that we intend to use. It comes in various shades. It comes in darker tones of brown, but we feel that this brighter tone of the wood, composite wood cladding, helps it pop.
Right.
We've used this on several projects in downtown as well as urban locations, but it provides architectural interest and pop, and I think in contrast with the dark bronze composite metal panel being used in that frame, it really provides that warmth and pop.
Okay,
What
thank
is
you.
composite wood? Is that like a strand board, or is it just wood over some surface? Or is it synthetic?
So it's a wood core based material that is that has a composite cladding or shell to it. This is a product that's been designed. This particular project or product is called Parklex. We've used this on several projects. It's a rain screen product. It works well. It holds up over time. The problem with traditional wood products is that they just don't, they don't maintain, they don't weather well over time. We've seen that on building facades.
All right, thank you. So do we start with any recommendations?
I just have one comment, is that I think it's the built-in elements in the plaza that will add the human scale to what I agree with Caroline is a large size storefront. So I just want to, I don't think I need to make a recommendation, but you could even maybe take that further, that it's going, like it's the depth of the plaza as well as the scale of the elements on there are what's going to really give the human scale that you're talking about, not the 12 or 14-foot glass storefront. So just be sure to keep that. I don't know if that's a recommendation. Develop it more. Thank you.
I think this project is very well done. I like the public space out in front of it doesn't exist anyplace else I see in Montclair.
It does
And
not.
if you go around the corner to what was built around the corner, those buildings are sitting 4 feet off the sidewalk, and this really provides some relief. I appreciate the green roof I see on the plans on the roof. I think that's fantastic. I would make one comment along Central Verde, which we really didn't discuss the pedestrian experience along there. I know it's all open grill work to see into the garage, and I know you have some planters there, but perhaps you can get some English ivy or something just to soften that a lot, just to make that experience a little bit more pleasant.
Sure.
Mr. Greenbaum.
My compliments on very refreshing and thoughtful presentation and thoughtful use of materials. I hoping that I see them and I believe them to be represented there as of the quality that I believe they are. Other projects in the community have not necessarily lived up to a particular standard that many of us aren't appreciative of. Had you, comment-wise, I just would want to make sure that we pass along to the planning board that, what we see there in terms of greenery and plantings should be something that we put in our recommendation. That's assuming my colleagues agree, but we need to make sure that there's the green plan shouldn't just be for the presentation, it should be realized and thoughtfully done.
Right, we agree, and our civil engineer has put together a full landscape plan, and they've called out the various species and they have details of those planters. I don't disagree, but that is an important element, the streetscape and the plantings being proposed here.
Thank you. Mr. Hyman.
Overall, I like the design. I do agree with Ms. Gillette about landscaping, providing adequate scale. I would also recommend additional permeable surfaces because the plaza area is large, just to kind of break it up a little bit and just add more greenery.
Sure. We'll take that comment into effect, but also keep in mind that this is also a downtown location, and we also talk about maintenance. That's one of the reasons that often you do not see these larger sort of public setbacks in plazas and stuff, is the maintenance and snow plowing, et cetera, that has to occur there, and the safety of the pedestrian experience. But that being said, we hear your comments, and we certainly want to strive to make this a pedestrian-friendly and inviting experience along the base of that building on the street.
And I would just, I would like to I think you've done the transition from the big building on the corner down to the parking garage in a very sensitive manner. So I think and I think working off what's going on in the corner with what you've done makes a good statement, a really nice statement. And I would just like to also include the fact that we add as much greenery as possible.
At the risk of sounding like the awning person, but I don't see any awnings, and I think that's fine, but should there be any awnings introduced, I think they have to go within the masonry openings and, just to bring the scale of those down to a pedestrian level, unlike Valley and Bloom, where they've been installed above the masonry openings to make it look even taller there.
Sure. So one of the reasons why awnings are often installed where they are is because there are clearance issues that you have to have on the underside for safety. Often objects larger than human scale, larger than 5 or 6 feet, might be moving underneath that space. That being said, I feel we do have some awnings and some relief that we're offering on this facade. We're also limited, though, in regards to setbacks. We are proposing some awnings along the front of this.
Oh, they're not showing.
Where? They're not shown.
We are proposing a small awning over the residential entrance of the building, and so it's a fixed canopy. I don't know if you're referring to fabric awnings or
the fabric awnings that might crop up as
it might be a nice relief
spaces
to all the hard materials to have some fabric as a softened material.
That's something we could certainly consider. I mean, the only consideration with fabric awnings is you want to make sure that they're maintained, they weather over time.
Sunbrella, acrylic,
Right.
solution dyed acrylic.
So, okay.
Mr. Rooney?
I have no further comments. I think this is a good project.
I certainly have one question.
Go ahead.
We're starting.
It's getting.
Yeah. We're done with questions.
A statement then.
Is it part of the recommendation?
We're at the recommendation.
Oh, it's part of recommendations, okay? One of the things that you could possibly do is have a green band between the street, the curb, and the actual plaza, just maybe a 3-foot band. This is something that's done, for example, I noticed in Saratoga, New York, as a way of creating to make that plaza space
I think that's part of the recommendation, that everyone seems to have said that we include as much greenery as possible.
Right. We'll certainly look into that. We'll look at providing additional engaged planters. We do have some planters that are adjacent to the building, but again, I hear the commission's comments, and we'll certainly look into opportunities where we are proposing some planters, and on Centro Verde Drive, we actually have a linear planter that is between the curb and the building to help break up that facade there.
That's exactly right.
And the streetscape, but we can certainly look at opportunities where we can increase that.
Okay.
If I may, I'd just like to add to that real quick, that there is a requirement in the redevelopment plan that from the curb to the building must be a paved material. So we are proposing a few planters here, but that would require, right now it requires a deviation to put that green space between the building and the curb line. So I hear your recommendations, but it also goes against the redevelopment plan.
Although you can certainly make the recommendation. And
So,
would you like me to review?
Yes, please.
I have 5 recommendations based on the comments that I heard. So the first one is to ensure that the project maintains the human scale of the building and the storefronts along the public plaza facade at the front of the building. Along Central Verde Drive, the project should incorporate taller greenery along the building facade wall to soften it. That was Mr. Ryan's comment. The applicant should incorporate additional greenery and plantings along the building along Orange Road in the public plaza space. The applicant, and that's they're kind of one, because then the next one was consider additional planters in the plaza space, so I guess that can be combined. And then if any awnings are incorporated into the project, they should maintain the storefront pedestrian scale.
What was that? What was
If
that?
any fabric awnings are incorporated into the facade, they should maintain the pedestrian scale.
Fabric awnings as
Mhm.
opposed to a hard awning.
Yeah, that's what I said. Fabric
Okay, good.
awnings. Mhm.
Pat?
Are we all in agreement with the
Yes.
recommendations?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now,
In reading the bylaw that we talked about earlier, in my opinion, the meeting's over. Because it gives you 3 categories of things that don't happen after 10:30. And that is new applications, new witness testimony, or new business. So,
Okay.
against my better judgment, I have to say it does use the word generally. So you can, if you want, because it uses the word generally, but
we just, this draft ordinance amending the development application referral.
I think that's something that requires discussion.
I can tell you that's
prefer to-
anything,
yeah.
my opinion, anything, because it says new business.
Yeah.
Right.
Anything after number 8 is new business.
Okay.
That's my opinion. Now, if you want to do 9 and 10,
I would
But
recommend
you
just
can't do
getting
C.
the
Well, then we have to
resolution
get the
passed.
10. We have to do the resolution.
Let's just get
Right.
the resolution passed.
yeah, absolutely.
That way we can
But
move
C and D is clearly new
Yeah.
business.
The
Okay.
amendment? Are we talking about the amendment to the 347, whatever, is that the one you want to talk about?
We're talking about the next,
We're
not the
talking
next
about
item on the agenda.
the 202 Bellevue Avenue.
All it is.
It's just approving it, which everyone's
So
read it.
everyone's reviewed it. We could just have a motion to approve it.
Motion to
Do 9,
approve.
by the way. Public comment.
Wait, I think I might be doing a motion. Sorry.
For them?
Wait a minute. Are we,
Oh, here.
is anyone here for public comment first?
Right, we just have to.
Yep.
No, Frank's here.
Mr. Rubicki.
Oh,
Frank Rubicki raised his hand.
oh.
So,
Do you,
Come on up.
come on up.
No, let us know.
I was going to do a brief, Frank Rabacki, 398 Upper Mountain Avenue. I was just going to do a brief presentation of my alternate plan for Lackawanna Plaza. You guys are not up for it. It'll be less than 10 minutes.
I don't think so. We have the time. I think it would take too much long now. Can you tell us rather than?
Can you send it to us?
I can send it to you. Do you want me to send it to you?
Yeah.
I don't want to get into any issues because of your dual position here.
Oh.
I didn't think so.
No.
Because, okay, I can definitely send it to you. I really, the plan, you've probably seen parts of it or been told parts of it. The plan is pretty straightforward. The thing that I wanted to emphasize out of this plan, which was not on Versanet or you haven't seen, was the HPC part of it. And it's really, there were 3 interesting things to me that relate to the HPC part. One was my plan essentially reoriented the parking lot, the West Main parking lot, the one, the supermarket parking lot that we're all talking about, from a north-south orientation, exclusively almost, to an east-west orientation, okay? That aside, parking aside, that was the original orientation of the train station. And I included a photograph that you've seen before, but a photograph to refresh your memory, the planning board's memory, that the orientation of the overall site was east-west. And it had a north-south drive aisle coming in off of Bloomfoot Avenue. I thought that was important because it respects, no matter what we end up doing with it, it respects the whole concept of the train station. Right now, you have things going perpendicular to each other, and it's kind of cluttered, and doesn't have any relationship. It fits them parking-wise, it doesn't fit the site. The second thing was, I'm trying to do it off the top of my head. Those are really the first two. Is the orientation was a major point that I wanted to get across. I included the photograph, which you can see in the presentation. But the third thing was a recap that I did for this group, and I would do it and it's included for the planning board, which essentially is 3 points. It addresses 3 questions that are, I think, bugging this application. One is this site historic by ordinance? And I think it is, obviously, and I think the expert in the testimony has ignored part of our ordinance and it's a serious deficiency. And that is 347, it's the last section, I think it's 347, 147, or 146. But basically it is, we specifically put in a part that said, here are the rules of interpretation. So when we wrote the ordinance, we said, okay, people are going to get confused. This is like, I think it's this, you think it's that. We actually put into our ordinance how to interpret it. And the ordinance says, we will interpret it liberally to achieve the intent and purpose of the overall article of historic preservation. So no matter what someone comes in and says about federal standards, as long as they don't conflict with state law, we have told ourselves by ordinance that we need to interpret the historic nature liberally and to the purpose and intent that we had all along. And that's not been brought up. And I think that needs to be emphasized. The second point in my recap was, what's the obligation of the applicant, the developer? And you touched on it before in a previous, tonight in another application. But in, I think it's section 137, section B, 6 and 10, which are the design standards for review in the ordinance. And one said, the first one says, you got to keep whatever's there. You got to make an attempt to keep it. Not only keep it, but you have to repair it. Or if you can't repair it, you have to replace it in kind, unless you can show otherwise. And this applicant has yet to bring a structural engineer.
And Mr. Rubicki, I'm very sympathetic to the testimony you're giving, and I think the commission. Yeah. Well, the commission, I think, agrees with that and has said as much in our memo to the planning board. But I think it's important to note that the Lackawanna Plaza application is before us, so there's nothing further that we can do about it. So these are all great points to make, and I encourage you to make it to the planning board.
And that's fine. My only purpose tonight was to give an FYI presentation of what I was planning to do. I do disagree with you strongly about...
With what? What do you disagree with? I'm sorry.
With this comment, Mr. Hyman's comment, sorry. That there's nothing further for this commission to do. Matter of fact, that's my biggest critique of this commission. I think you stumbled in handling this application, and the recourse that you do have as individuals or groups or whatever is to comment on the application in front of the planning board. That's still open to you. That remains open to you until they close public hearing. So for you to say, I've made all my comments known and et cetera, et cetera, I'm done now, is fine. If you believe it's done and there's nothing further you can do, I appreciate that. But there is the option. It's not like you can't do it. And one of the things that you do in your role, which is critical because there's no one else in town to do it, is that public comments can be used to summarize all the testimony, all the proofs, all the inputs. And somebody's got to tie that together and put it in a coherent way for the planning board to consider, either against against preservation, for some preservation, for more preservation, whatever it is. But you are ideally suited and designated by the township to do this. If you do not do that, then you're going to leave it up to lay people who don't have your experience, don't have your expertise or insights to do it for the town. And that's fine. But don't tell me that you can't do any more, because that just frustrates me. It really does. Because that's part of why I think each and every one of you is appointed to this commission. Okay?
I think the challenge we have is, since we're not the deciding body, we can be in our I think Mr. Hyman's concern is we can have our formal channels, but you're correct, there is a public comment period where we can speak up as individuals, as residents, or we could speak up as what has already been established by the HBC as certain positions we could bring up and repeat as objectors. So the question is the formal channel through the HBC and our limitations, and then the other channels as residents, et cetera. So we're not, I'm speaking for myself, we're not discounting future opportunity.
We're generally on the same
Yeah.
side of things. We look at things differently. I agree with that. But again, I emphasize that you have a unique skill set and experience and position. And we all know that the planning board looks at me differently from how they look at you or people on the zoning board or lawyers or experts. And because you come with instant credibility and authority. Okay, the public doesn't. They show up and they, okay, he lives on this street. So I just want to emphasize that.
No, thank you. And many of us have been following and
Yeah.
attend the planning board meetings, that you know, so.
No, I know. I just hope you continue to.
I think your
Thank
points
you.
about the circulation and the ordinance are very noted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good points.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Last thing, resolution. Everyone's read this resolution?
Yes.
Which resolution are we talking about?
The one about Bellevue Avenue and the cafe, the...
Certificate of appropriateness.
Oh, so, I'm sorry, yeah, certificate of appropriateness. So, it is...
Was that here?
Here, the HPC Certificate of Appropriateness, 2018-44 Montclair Cafe, 202 Bellevue Avenue, which is the installation of new window, removal of awning, replacement of awning, and installation of new signage. It is in the Upper Montclair Historic District. So, we have a,
I'm abstaining.
I'm sorry, I'm just asking in terms of
So,
procedure.
yeah, someone,
Make a motion?
they've reviewed the ordinance. Are there any amendments?
Yeah,
No.
any amendments or any comments about it?
No.
Okay, so
No.
we have a, someone would like...
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And the adjournment, so,
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good night.
Kathleen, I have a question.